thing I got.
Sure.
I'm about to mess something up here.
Go. I guess we are good to go. I'll call this meeting to order. Thank you, everybody, for being here and try to get through this in good order. Happy New Year.
Happy
The
New
first
Year.
meeting of 2022. Did folks have a chance to look at the agenda? I mean, the minutes? Any additions or corrections?
No.
I would entertain a motion then
Also moved.
to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The members of the public, would they like to comment on any items?
Does not look like we have any, right?
Okay. That being said, we'll move on to the main portion of the meeting. We had some discussion, just kind of in the interest of board best practices after the last meeting, and what I came up with was that, what we're doing, it seems like in a lot of it, the agenda items is we're asking all these questions in the middle of presentations, and that was particularly true with your presentation and with Emily's. I was looking at Lynn, Emily's presentation, and so what we thought would be a better approach is to let people make their presentations and ask questions at the end, because in about 3/4 of the cases, the questions were answered later in the presentation, and I was as guilty of that as anybody, because I think we all got eager to know the answers to our questions. So as questions come up, as people are presenting and you think of things rather than ask right then, I'd suggest not noting them down on a notepad, and then we can ask them at the end, and I think it will speed things up and allow our presenters to get through their presentations without as much interruption.
Well, I think that's a good idea because our meetings have been going rather long. People have things to do after the meetings. So.
Right. So I think it will cut down on time and it'll just make it a little bit more cohesive. We'll be able to have better discussions. So, our first executive limitation item is an education thing on library facilities. Robert, hello there.
Just in the interest of clarity, would there be any objection to me taking off my mask while I speak? I'll stay up at the front. And
I'd like it if you take off your mask.
I figured you might.
Yeah.
Okay, so good morning to the members of the board. I guess good afternoon. It's after lunch. I've just got a brief presentation. I know we've carved out quite a few minutes for it. It should not take the full time. This presentation is part of our annual review for the board of our asset protection program. Assets being defined roughly as the facilities, infrastructure, and elements that help us to operate the library. So I'm here to present that to you today. This presentation is going to have a structure where I kind of cover a few items up front that address the what, the why, and the how of the program, and then we'll get into the details and just looking forward from last year into the current year as we go into 2022.
I think I'm gonna have to do it for you.
Oh, okay, next please.
Here.
So this is the what of the policy. This is the board policy, policy 3F. So we report annually on the state of our buildings and infrastructure in order to provide the board with insight into our compliance with this policy. The library director will not allow assets to be unprotected, inadequately maintained, or unnecessarily used. Next, please.
Oops. Sorry, I'm gonna do some business here. Okay.
All right, this is the why. So our business services, my predecessor in the business services department developed a vision that gelled with this policy, and I've continued to adhere to it. Our facilities are a safe and welcoming place of appropriate size to meet the needs of staff and customers. So this is our vision for library facilities, and it's also the purpose that guides our efforts as we protect and maintain the assets as part of what we'll be reporting today. You can see a few views here: East Bend, downtown Bend in the computer area in the second floor. This is actually one of the programs that was held in the middle of the year when we started reopening in-person events. This one was a program up at Sisters.
You can, if you can put a little X, hit the X on that.
Yes.
Thanks.
Next slide. Okay, and this is kind of the bulk of the how, and then we get into the details as we drill down. So our facilities strategy, Denise Center laid this out last year as to how we're going to do it. I'm here to tell you that we've implemented all of the things that she presented to the board last January, and so this is more of a how did we do it? A combination of both responsive and preventative. So we have a system in place for staff members to file action requests of the facilities team to identify either safety concerns, informational issues, observations, or general needs in the facilities. So that is our responsive piece. We receive those action requests and we field our facilities team to address them. And then we also have a preventative maintenance program for all of our critical infrastructure. So we are typically scheduling those with our vendors, or we're putting them onto our own schedule. We'll talk a little bit about that. Moving more towards a proactive, oops, I think I did just advance.
No, I saw your hand move, so I did.
Okay.
Did you want to go back?
Yes, please.
Oh, sorry, now I got to figure that out.
Back arrow. All right. So moving more towards a more proactive approach. So one of the things that was built into the budget as we put together this current fiscal year and we actually brought into being was the addition of a second facilities technician. So we have 2 people in facilities at this point, and that allows us to be much more responsive to really have to do less of a triage on a daily basis of, well, what are the things that one person can get to in a given day and identify critical versus things that can wait. We're able to cover a lot more, and also with 2 people, we're able to perform those corrective actions much more quickly. Also, what we've done is we've data mined a lot of our prior action request history in order to flesh out and increase the kinds of things that we would set for preventative maintenance, starting to notice trends and behaviors that can be addressed up front with a regular maintenance schedule, or taking an existing maintenance schedule and maybe increasing the frequency based on what we see, and setting up things like certain seasonal checks that we're seeing. We see it in the history as well. So in addition to the kinds of work we're doing with our vendors for preventive maintenance, we're also increasing our level of attention on the sites through site visits, through observations, and through regularly scheduled inspections that we do within the facilities team. And again, by expanding from a single person to 2 people, it allows us to stay on top of these annual items so that they don't even enter into the action request forms. We're already staying ahead of them. Things like seasonal preparation, so winterizing our buildings, getting ready for the summer season for increased stresses on our air conditioning and other summer type infrastructure. Getting prepped for fire season. This is something that has increased over time, and so getting our HVAC ready for the kinds of things that the settings that we set up in the late summer, early fall in order to address some of the air quality issues that have been increasing. And then setting up annual, semi-annual, quarterly, and monthly inspections. And this is just a sampling of the kinds of inspections we do. We put those in our calendar as regular reminders so that we're fielding our team out to the sites specifically to look for those things in addition to their regular visits out to the sites. Okay, so a look back on the prior calendar year. several major accomplishments. The reopening of the meeting rooms and the tutor rooms to the community. While this was a small activity from a facility standpoint, it was getting those rooms cleaned up, getting furniture back in place, making sure that the lighting was set up properly. It's a big thing for our community to be able to use those spaces again after we were shut down for such an extended period through the early section of what continues to be our COVID adventure. Second, safety upgrades at all branches. So this is just an ongoing effort. So it's not something that I expect to go away. It's the continual look of fresh eyes to say, are we addressing any issues that could be potential safety concerns ahead of any issues that happen? So some small examples here. You saw that picture a few slides back of the computer room. It had these colorful computer chairs at the desks. Those chairs are really lightweight. They're very well made, but they're on wheels. And what we have noticed from incident reports or observations of the staff at the branches was that those chairs by design were being associated with a certain number of people slipping out of the chairs. The chairs were rolling back. And you know, it is one of those things where no one's getting hurt, but people are slipping out of chairs, and that's an early indication we might have some kind of a safety issue coming up. So we went through all of the branches and found all of those lightweight chairs with the wheels, and we've replaced them with glides. So little flat pads, just provide enough additional friction so that if a person is sitting on the edge of the chair, it's not going to slip out from under it in the same way that wheels might. Things like the addition of lighted fire exit signs in areas where we just had glow in the dark signage to address, upgrade something that was already there and in compliance, but didn't necessarily rise to that level of feeling like, yes, if there was a no kidding major emergency, we could be confident that we were doing everything we could to help everyone egress safely. So a couple small examples there. And we went through each of the branches and identified some of those little items and implemented them. Mechanical upgrades at the accessible doors at Redmond. This was an item that we did identify as a result of a customer being injured on site. So this was a corrective action after injury. I believe that we briefed the board a few months ago when the incident actually happened. We went out there with our door and lock vendor, took a look at the mechanism, and determined that while the mechanism itself was in compliance with ADA, it could use some tuning. So that we were able to adjust the opening rate so that it would stay open a little bit longer for our customers that had mobility challenges. We also identified that it was an older model. It was the original automatic opening door that was installed at Redmond. And there were better models out there that could be more responsive and less likely to continue closing or continue pushing if it met any kind of resistance. So we went ahead and we implemented that change as well. Next item is furniture upgrade. So this is one that was identified in some of the capital expenditures for the fiscal year budget for my department. So we had set aside some money in order to order additional ergonomic tables, those up-down tables that we see in the staff areas, and a few other smaller furniture pieces to make the workflow for staff better and run more smoothly. So it was already in progress from the prior fiscal year, and we had continued on what Denise had put in place for that in these areas here. The installation of a video production room. So this is an effort from community relations. They're doing more and more video production in staff, and from the facility side, we were able to help them with purchasing pieces of furniture, other pieces of equipment, or upgrades to the room itself in order to make that room more suited to the kinds of things they wanted to do for ongoing video production in the admin building. The new roof at Sisters, so that was an action that was approved a few board meetings ago. And this picture here is a progress picture. It's hard to see from that distance and this size, but there's a section that's darker. That's where they were still laying in all of the composite material. That work did complete at the very beginning of January. So right after the new year, they pretty much wrapped up, and there's just a small amount of closeout at this point for us to go and do the walkthrough with the vendor and make sure everything is up to snuff. But we weathered the last round of snow and rain with the new roof, so we already kind of put it through its early paces. And then finally, last year we did kick off a project to install electrical vehicle charging stations up at Sisters. This is a partnership with the city of Sisters, and the eventual placement of those units is going to be in that shared parking area between City Hall and the library, so that it will be available for charging. It should be 4 separate charging stations in a row in that area available for people to charge their vehicles. I say kick off because this project is still ongoing, and I'll actually address one of those details in just a sec. Next slide. Okay, so that was the year prior. Looking ahead to the current year, what are some of the things we're looking at? What are our challenges? What are the areas where we're really going to be focusing our attention in facilities building management? First one is kind of an ongoing area of focus for me as we continue in our construction and building projects. So at each step, as that schedule gets closer and closer for certain buildings to be taken offline and go through upgrades, we're taking a critical look at making the judgment call of when is the right time for us to implement some of the other facilities improvement activities that we have planned. So a really basic example of that one is we could opt to resurface one or more of the parking lots. But we'll also be looking very carefully at when we do those resurfacings. Would it be prior to a period of time where heavy equipment is going to roll right in and undo all of that surface work? Or do we time it so that we surface after they're all gone? So that's one of those examples where, you know, it's something that in our regular course of action, we might identify every few years. We're going to take a look at those parking lots and making sure that we're resurfacing for cracks and other things. Now we'll be taking a really critical look at when that timing makes sense. Now, having said that, one thing I want to reassure the board is that safety items and also any kind of critical infrastructure, those are areas where we're not going to be saying, well, let's wait 6 months to a year to do this. If it's something that can keep our customers and staff safer, if it's a critical piece of infrastructure to keep the operation going, obviously we're going to continue to get those scheduled where it makes sense. This is more of the cosmetic details and the other things that by making those actions happen before construction could be impacted by construction. Second challenge for this year is an ongoing challenge from the last 2 years, and that's supply chain delays. So I can tell you in my department, we're already seeing 2 impacts from supply chain for major project efforts. One is that electrical vehicle charging station. We kicked off that effort in early fall of last year. And we're working with our vendor to get the critical parts and pieces. And electrical vehicle charging stations are a hard to come by item. And the supply chain issues have made that even more difficult. So that is delaying that project by a certain amount. In addition, as I mentioned, we have 2 facilities technicians now instead of 1. Built into the budget for this fiscal year was a certain amount of money to acquire a second vehicle so that 2 facilities people can go in 2 different directions, and one can service North County and one can service South County. Until that vehicle becomes available through the dealer we're working with, they are working in one facilities vehicle and doing a bit more of the coordination and effort of figuring out, okay, what places are we going today? How are we going to minimize the amount of travel and travel time and spend the most time for best effort on site? So those are 2 areas. And then in minor areas, it is taking longer to get certain work done. We have a lighting control panel in Holcomb where we could have repaired it last month, but we had to wait about 6 weeks for the replacement parts to come in. And it's just, you know, little parts and pieces, things you wouldn't always anticipate can be really hard to come by. One thing that I'm struggling with right now is KN95 masks. I'd like to acquire more KN95 masks, but they are like the toilet paper from 2020. Like everybody is buying them up now. So it's much more challenging to identify a good reputable source that also has stock available for us to be able to supply. The next one is support of the temporary branch location. So this is one where facilities is just one smaller piece of the overall operation impact this year. We're going to see Sisters and Lapine begin construction in fall of 2022. So in the lead up to that, we are looking at temporary branch locations, and facilities will be supporting that effort in terms of making sure that we have the infrastructure, the equipment, and the services that we need in order to run those temporary locations. And then finally, adjusting and changing COVID protocols and requirements. So I mentioned the KN95 masks. Just every week, we're monitoring CDC guideline changes, OHA guideline changes, and making sure that we're both staying compliant and also doing things that make sense for the safety of our staff and our customers. I think that's the last slide. So I'd like to offer up to you now. I can answer any questions you might have, and we can jump back to anything if you're curious. And I'll put my mouse back on. Yes.
I was wondering, are you going to, is there the potential that we might put charging stations at some of the other libraries, like at the Central Library or the Revenue? Is that something?
Yes, absolutely. So at Central, that is a topic that is very much under consideration. We're trying to figure out what locations make sense, whether it makes sense to have some in our staff parking area and some in customer areas, where positioning makes sense. For Redmond, it's also under consideration. It's not as solid of a plan just because in the city of Redmond itself, there is access to other charging areas and infrastructure, whereas over at the central location, obviously there's far less that's within close distance where a person could charge and then walk over to the library. So yes, the answer is yes.
Does the city have or county have an overall plan for that infrastructure, or is anyone in charge of electric vehicle charging infrastructure, or is it just?
I wish I could tell you unequivocally, yes, there is like an EV charging czar in the county. If that person exists, I have yet to meet them. It does seem to be really a patchwork of localities and organizations. So like several of the areas that currently have charging stations appear to have been by the choice of the group or the organization that owns that area.
Okay.
Yeah, this one, I can't speak to too many of the details of how we got here with the City of Sisters, because this has been in the works for a while. Denise Center was working with the city manager of Sisters before I came on board to really get this thing started. And so I think that it's possible that the city approached us.
They did.
And said, hey, this is a great opportunity, but we'd like to partner because of the cost and being able to fit it into both our budgets, since both of our entities use that parking lot.
I could add on a little bit, the building code is being driven more to require that new developments, so like Central and like Redmond, where there's major renovations, actually require that you provide those services and plan for future services. There's certain states, California enacted it a while back, where it's mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if Oregon has made it mandatory or as a good practice, but it is generally something that we look at in every development that we're doing. And I want to say that the building code has now made it mandatory.
Okay.
And then also along the lines of new construction, part of our larger coordination with Energy Trust of Oregon is the discussion of electric vehicle charging. So Energy Trust of Oregon is also who we're working with to discuss things like renewable energy and other conservation options at these new construction sites to make them their environmental impact as small as possible.
Would that renewable energy translate down to any solar power that might come into play?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, so in development for both of the new locations, both Central and the Redmond construction, we are looking at photovoltaic or solar panels for both sites in order to mitigate and potentially even eliminate our energy usage over, a net period of time, like a year.
But not to the renovations of the other branch library?
It actually is a state requirement that we have to spend 1.5% of our development cost, or total project cost, for each property. And those can be for renewable energy sources, which is the photovoltaic. And we can combine them and spend the money like all on Central and all on Redmond. Because of the major renovations, we have a much better potential to spend the volume of dollars and really get a usable asset. But it's a state mandate requirement that we have to do that. So it's not optional. And so we will be doing it. And I know I'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the LEED certification that's in the work pack today.
And from the standpoint as the person who's managing the funds for the district, I'm also very much focused on making sure that we get our best value on utility usage across the county. So if it makes better sense for us to concentrate solar in one or two places where we can get the most efficient system, that's going to have positive effects for all of the branches, whether or not those branches have PV installed on site. It will still benefit in terms of our overall means as a library district to manage our utilities money.
Along that line, I assume that all of the hookups are universal for all of the vehicles now? Or are we going to end up with model changes?
Ray, once again, I wish I could tell you the answer was yes about universal hookups. That is definitely a big headache right now. It's very reminiscent of about 20 to 25 years ago in computer hardware, where you had such a variety of standards for charging, for data connections, etc. We're very much in that era right now, I think, for electric vehicle, where you have a variety of different car manufacturers who are not, and this is just American car manufacturers, who are not on the same page for standardization. European car manufacturers are all on one other standard that I think only one US car manufacturer follows. And then Japanese car manufacturers and Asian car manufacturers, I believe, are on a different standard too. So hopefully we will over time migrate more towards where we're at with computer hardware and less where we're at with plugs, where you've got that, if you ever travel and you've got the bag of different adapters. Right now, a lot of car manufacturers will give you the kit with adapters so that when you show up to a charger, you can still make do. And even then, it's not 100% universal.
So the manufacturers of the charging stations don't have proactively looking at interchangeable connectors.
Not to my knowledge, not right now. There's still too much of a variety to it that it would be cumbersome at this point for them to do that.
So we do have the possibility, if we go in right now, that our charging stations could become obsolete.
It's possible that the connectors could become obsolete. The chargers, I think, will obsolete themselves at a much slower rate. Things like speed of charging and overall flow are things that are going to degrade much more slowly than changes in standardization of connectors. So we might need to invest 5-10 years down the line in somebody coming out to re-terminate or recap those connectors to whatever the new standard happens to be.
And the cabling also then, probably.
Potentially not. It really does depend. When you convert a plug from one standard to another, you don't have to rewire it back to the base. So it could be a similar kind of a setup.
Yeah, I think
It's hard to predict.
idea. I've seen it. I was really surprised it pulled into a, what was it? It was in Tumalo. The food truck station there. And lo and behold, there's an electric charger station. The other question I had is, there's no sign on it that says, like in Portland, they say electric charging only. This was just a station, it just was there. So brings up the question in my mind, are ours going to be electric charging station only? And if so, who's going to enforce that? And the question is, actually, who pays for this? Not the station itself.
For the actual usage.
Electricity.
Yeah, so two good questions. In terms of signage, we really haven't determined that yet. So that's something that we can definitely discuss down the line to decide, whether we want to reserve those spots as not parking spots per se for general use, but parking spots for people who are specifically charging. And then also how we would enforce that. So that is kind of an operational question, and I want to be working with other departments to really move forward with a decision like that. The second question in terms of who's paying it, and initially, it will be coming from our electricity bill. We're running off of our electricity. So that was the initial agreement between us and the city, because we do receive certain things from City of Sisters in terms of use of lighting in the parking lot that they pay for. And so until we have any hard numbers, there was a verbal agreement to say, well, right now it may be a wash. If it looks like there is a significant imbalance, then we can address that through some later cost sharing. In terms of that being a pay station, currently right now, we're not looking at that as an option. It would be available to anyone who wanted to park there and hook up.
Yeah, I think in the overall environmental impact, whatever we have to pay is worth the small incremental cost from our electric bill. If we're a public entity and we don't pay taxes for it, so it's a benefit for the entire community.
Yeah, and the hope again is through installation of some of these other renewable energy sources on our own site, that will help to offset costs of future electric vehicle charging stations. And like I say, managing across the county should hopefully offset any additional costs for public usage of this one of the systems.
It sort of reminds me though of the same thing we had with the RFID system. Wait a couple of years and see how everything shakes out in the industry and nationwide, and then go in. Also, hopefully the costs go down.
Right.
But all these questions about universality, who enforces all this other stuff, it becomes generally acceptable that electric parking spaces are only for electric and it's never a charge. Then go in there and the standards are being set already. What's the pros and cons of waiting a couple of years?
Well, I mean, in terms of this move at Sisters, this really was an opportunity to partner with the City of Sisters. And as I said, it is something that they have been looking at for several years. And we're not really, even though it feels like from popular media that this is just beginning, we're about 10 years in on electric vehicle charging stations and standards. So I feel like for Sisters, the timing is right. I also feel like for the new construction projects, both because of the code requirements and also because the timing of it is still a little ways out there before we have to decide on vendors and sourcing and charging standards. I think the timing is good for that too. And also we'll be benefiting from the expertise of the people who are on both the design team and the construction team for these projects to really help us get best value for what we're installing.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think that this is a topic that we'll be hearing more about as we go along. Does anybody else have questions for Robert?
Well, I've got a few other ones.
Okay,
On the action request, is there a specific time frame that you have to respond to them and complete an action?
Well, given that the action requests cover the gamut of everything from I need more KN95 masks to I have a major electrical issue, can we get somebody out here ASAP? It's difficult for me to impose frankly an arbitrary closure standard of we must have this closed within 24 hours. So what I work with my team is We do weekly assessment of any open items that have been open for longer than a week to identify which of those are critical, must happen this week, let's get it on the schedule ASAP, versus the ones that are, some of them are earmarked as informational. Hey, just to let you know, I'm hearing a weird squeak on the door at downtown when it opens, but it's only like a random occurrence, maybe twice a day. So it just stays up there as a watch item, and then we just add more comments to it as we go. So those things, when we review together as a team, we say, okay, these make sense for immediate attention. These over here make sense to keep open as watch items as long as we need to. So we have that history of that particular issue.
I was thinking more in terms of responding to the request.
For like critical ones.
So anyone, somebody puts in a request for an action,
Yeah.
you have a time frame in which you have to get back to them as to what you're going to be doing.
Oh, in terms of getting back to them, we're getting back to them within the day. As long as it happens during weekday hours, because my team is only here from Monday to Friday.
Right.
And then weekend requests we address Monday morning.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good,
yeah.
yeah,
In
just
terms of
closure.
actual closure rate, I thought that
Right,
was the question.
that's what I want, closure. And in terms of wildfire now, I think Lapine is pretty much has defensible space all around it. But I'm not sure with Sisters and Sun River. Sun River, I think, may be at risk. I'm not sure about Sisters.
That is a great question. So I will tell you for Lapine, that was one of the things that I could have given you a laundry list of those safety upgrades.
Yeah.
That was one for Lapine. We had one tree that was a bit too close to the building for a defensible space. So we were able to get an arborist out there to take that tree down. I mean, I'm talking, it was against the building. It was very close. And so I believe we now do have a decent defensible space in Lapine. Sun River, we have smaller aspen trees that are close up to the building. They are smaller, however. So I want to leave that open as a question of how defensible a space that is. I can tell you that as we're looking at Sun River specifically, because of the changes to some of the building envelope that are being anticipated in the design, we will be also looking at what elements right near the building makes sense to retain versus what will have to come out just as a nature of the construction. Yeah.
And Sisters is,
Sisters is quite defensible, I would say. Yeah, the only trees that are close to the building really are decorative trees. They're not of a large enough biomass to really represent a concern there. It does help that we share that property common with the city, and they're also quite focused on that.
yeah, I assume I don't recall us having any decorative bush, brush, or shrubs around them.
I mean, there is a small amount of landscaping, but none of that level of size and density and combustibility that would be concerning.
Okay, good.
I would say that City of Sisters would be burning with the library.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Right, there would be more issues.
Sure would.
Yeah, well, the reason I ask is because a lot of the wildfires have the conflagrations. People have run through the library.
Yes.
And Red Cross or FEMA has set up their headquarters at a library because they have the infrastructure, the internet, everything else there.
Yeah.
And
Ventilation.
ventilation, right. So that's my concern. It will suddenly become the spot to go to, the safety zone.
Yeah, this time I don't have any wildfire concerns for the building. So,
Okay.
yes, thank you for asking.
Okay, any additional questions?
Just one last one. The Sisters and Lapine remodels,
Yes,
we already have space to rent.
and move a little closer.
Okay.
That's how.
You have space identified to rent that we can use.
We are currently working to identify those spaces, so we do not have those spaces identified yet. We have some candidates and Sisters, and Lapine, we have a pretty solidly. So in both of those cases, we have options in front of us. We have yet to finalize that decision and really start to put together our plan for operations and logistics.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Very informative. We now have our asset protection monitoring report from Todd.
Thank you. As if you want to get my thinking in line, I had Robert present because that covers most of the issues that are in here. Thank you, did a great job with that. There are some kind of one-off issues. I think you've all had a chance to read it, so I will go ahead and open it up to questions. I will say that after going through this, that my conclusion is that the district is in compliance with the asset protection executive litigation policy.
Did people have a chance to take a look at that?
And if you'd like, I can go through it when I want it. If not,
Did anybody have any questions? Comments? If not, I entertain a motion.
Also move.
Second. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Okay, next up is Greg for bond update.
If you guys are okay, I'll take off my mask, but make it easier for you to hear me.
and just a reminder, this is also for Greg. We'll let him go through his presentation and then we'll take questions.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot to cover today, and I'm kind of following the board or my monthly report, you know, the general topics there, generally about communication, how the team is working and what's going on. You know, really happy with what's been transpiring over the last month or so. And the beginning of this year, we've had some really good team building and partnering sessions with our design team members, with our construction members, with the DPL team, our team, to really get, you know, there's the design process, there's the construction process, but there's the communication and the teamwork process. And we spent some real good quality time on that here this past month in talking about how we're going to work together, how we're going to communicate, what are important goals, how do we think about our goals and look at them and monitor them as they go through, so that in 3-4 years from now, as we are completing these projects, we're able to look back and say, okay, we did it the way we wanted to do it. We deliver the product that we want to deliver back, you know, in design and its quality and how the buildings will function, how Robert will be able to maintain them in the future, how the budgets and how the schedules. And so it's an element that isn't always talked about a lot, but it's a real important element in my mind. How do we maintain a good, positive atmosphere with our team and a highly collaborative functioning team? And so, you know, I'm coming off of some really good work sessions that I think we had that made me feel real good about how it's moving forward there. So just wanted to share that with you. Our schedules, master development schedule, we haven't made any recent changes to that. We are tracking right on that schedule. You know, it's a large complex with 7 different properties and different pieces going at each. And so that's really tracking well, and we're happy with that. We're constantly monitoring that. And, you know, one of the things is Robert touched on about, you know, the supply chain issues and how could they impact our schedule in 2 years from now, 3 years from now. That's something like right now, Kirby Nagelhout, who's our CMGC on Central and Redmond, they're doing a construction schedule, and they're looking at as part of their analysis of our schematic design package. What are the long lead items out there? What are those systems and subs that we have to think about today? Do we need to engage them sooner? Do we need to order things earlier? What's happening in the market? As we look at the design, as they're pricing it for a budget, also looking at and seeing what's its availability in the market today. And will it be available for us in, you know, a year or 2 years out? So those are things that they aren't always front and foremost, but they're a component of what's going on. And, you know, as we go through that process, we'll look and talk about that and how it may or may not impact the design of the project, but even the timing. I was talking with my team this morning about that. What we're going to be looking for in design assist and early awards and long lead items from our contractors and getting their input on that. So from a schedule standpoint, like I said, everything's tracking really well to our development schedule. There was no change to the construction timelines that are in the board report, and the summary bar schedule that's also in there is relatively unchanged at this point and tracking well. The budget is, December really culminated a 2-month massive budget update. And so, kind of take a step back. We started with the budget that was established and to determine what is the bond amount and was our baseline. And with that was the sale of the bonds and the establishment of the premiums that came with that. That really established what's our total dollars available to execute the work. Those budget numbers were created based on the Henneberry-Eddy G4 design that was done pre-bond. Since then, we went through and Miller Holt and Steel Architects created their concept designs for the entire project. So each of the facilities. And that was developed as we went through. You guys saw those. It came out in October. And we went into a very in-depth conceptual pricing exercise that really started in October and ended literally at the end of December. And we revisited the entire bond budget, every line item, every component of it. So construction cost estimates for each of the facilities, the FF&E budgets. Miller Hall has done detailed estimates on our FF&E packages. And with that comes owner furnished items as well. So computer systems, the DPL team, Mark Hovey, went through and looked at what are all of our computer needs for all these new facilities and renovations. What are our needs for the material handling system? Those cost estimates, and working with FE Tech on all of them, where Lynn and her team all went through those components in conjunction with Miller Hall and design, collections budget, all the soft costs, evaluating what are going to be fees, permit fees, all of those fees, and all of the elements of the soft costs, which are a variety of, we had a big chunk with our design team, and that was a big chunk. But then there's a lot of testing and inspections, specialty consultants. And so we literally went top to bottom and went through that, looked at those to see where they were at. With all that information, what I did is look at each individual project, where it stood, or how did the cost estimates compare to the original. Some were higher, some were lower. And then looked at how do we take our reserves that we've been holding, and if you saw in the report, I allocated them out to each of the different work packages and projects. And so that it created contingencies within each of the work packages. So within Central, Redmond, Downtown Bend, and the branches. And went through that and to allocate those based on what we saw the needs were going to be and where the risks were at, right? That's one of the things that always looking at from a budget standpoint is the risk against our budget. Do we have it properly anticipated, expected costs known or planned for, escalations over time, and contingencies? And so that was kind of an exercise that we went through to allocate that. And in the board report this month, I did a different, an expanded report for you on costs. And to try and show you a little bit more. And so this is kind of the result of this. There's, as you know, I have much more detailed reports I've worked with to generate this report. And so there was one of the things was to clear, and we always have the original budget that ties back to the original cost estimate that ACC did to Pennyberry Petty and the premiums that were generated with the sale of the bonds. The total revised budget is really how I've gone through to do the reallocations. And I say I, but it's our whole team. And it's in great working relationship with DPL, going through, talking about that and getting their input and also their approvals of everything that we did. The spent to date is a column that you guys have always seen, and that's just actual based on the billings that we are receiving and processing for payment. And then the committed to date, and that was one that we talked about last month, of adding that in so you could see what's being committed and what's being spent. But then the total revised budget is what's forecasted to be spent in total. Within each of the 4 work packages, as you may remember, we created work package 1 was Central Library, work package 2 is Redmond, work package 3 is Bend, and then work package 4 is the branches. The 5th component that we break out is general administrative costs, and it's a smaller amount, but it houses the some general costs that are really for overall, so it includes our costs as owner's representative, and it includes the collection, which is a big component that it's in there, because the collection is bought for the district, not for an individual branch. And so it's being treated as an overall cost. And those are 2 of the bigger elements of that budget. Within each of the building components, we broke down so you could see, like under Central Library, if you're looking at that report, the site and due diligence cost, which is really the purchase of that land and for that piece. Then the hard costs, which are construction costs. So that's the cost that we would be spending with our general contractor, Kirby Naval Power. The FF&E cost is costs that we would be spending with other vendors directly contracted that we will. And so that's all the furniture, the systems, the AMH system, the computers. There's a variety of components to that. And then there's soft costs, and soft costs are permits, fees, utility costs, all of the design costs, all of our testing inspection costs. There's a large list of those costs that are associated with soft costs. And then there's contingency and what's left in there. And so you can see, like under Central Library, we've increased as we reallocated the contingency. You can see if you look under total original budget, reserve contingency, it's near the bottom of that column. It was 32 million, and when you look at it under the total revised budget, it's 1.1. It's because it was distributed up to those projects. So that's the format, and the same format follows each of those projects, how we allocated money. So some of the things that were like significant changes, when you look at our budgets on central construction and FF&E, the hard costs really remain very consistent. Soft costs actually went down some there because there was costs there that was just not necessary. We had higher budgets there where we needed it elsewhere. Contingency went up because we've allocated those contingency dollars out there, and that's a sizable contingency that's there, really driven off of where we at in our pricing. So we're doing this on our concepts. We're now in schematic design. And we are going through a schematic design process, cost estimating, that's going to take place here in January and February, and March we'll see the result, another update like this from that. Each time we go through a design phase, we go through a budget phase to always be looking at it, updating and refining it. And we'll see some of those contingency dollars then flow up into, likely up into the construction costs. And that all has to do with how we evaluate what's in the design and where we're at. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Downtown Bend, not a lot of change, a little bit of change on the hard cost budget, a little increase on the FF&E budget. And a little bit down on soft costs. Overall, all of the budgets went up because we allocated contingency to them. It's one that we're doing a lot of study on right now, even though we're not doing any design and we don't build it till the very end. Really taking a hard look at making sure our budget is accurate for downtown Bend. So when we're ready to actually spend the dollars in 2-3 years from now, the dollars are there and they're the appropriate amount. So, and we'll talk more about that in March as we go to this next round. We're comfortable where we're at today, but we're doing a lot of research with our team to really look at what is the planned scope and do we have it all properly planned for cost-wise. Redmond, again, some small movements up and down in the line items. Overall went up a little bit with our contingency. It's in really good shape at this point. The branch libraries had, on a percentage basis, one of the biggest changes. And you can see we had a hard cost budget of 4.2 million, and we've increased that almost 100%, and it's up to about 7.9 million. And that was really driven by truly understanding the scope of work that we're going to do to all of the branches, making sure East Bend was fully funded to do everything that we want to do there. Looking at what we're doing at Sun River with the front entry and the canopy and the problems that have always existed there with that building. Of all of our branches, Sun River will get the greatest amount of physical change to the building and to the site. Sisters and Lapine are real straightforward interior renovations, very minor tweaks on the exterior skin of the building, moving a book drop and capturing some little alcoves, but very minor. For Sun River will have a significant change to the entrance, and it increases some square footage inside the building, improves how the building is going to flow in there, and really addresses a real problem with how the snow accumulation and how people access the building. So you'll see that as we continue through the design process, and that one starts in schematic design in March. And so you won't see those coming to you for a little while, but we're budgeting and planning for those. That was one we had, much like downtown Bend, we had a real detailed work session with the architect and with our cost estimating groups to really talk about what we have to do there to address that building. And so as we went through, we really looked at that, and you can see all of the line items for the branches are significantly up as a percentage. But I think they're appropriately up for the planned scope of work that was presented in the conceptual designs that you saw back in October. These costs relate to those specific. So I think it really, as we went through and we talked about the renovation of the spaces, the other thing that we really looked at was the condition of the facilities, systems like the lighting systems and the mechanical systems. Particularly the mechanical systems on all the branches are nearing their lifespan, and some would run out maybe a year or two after we finished. So it was like right now is the time to address all of those components, and that's built into these budgets here. And so that's the major reallocations between these and the allocations of the contingency. At the bottom of the report, I put a few little reference points. So under total revised budget, the combined contingency currently sits at 31 million. That's adding up all of the contingencies there. Just to kind of give you a little bit of reference of where that's at. The percentages under spent to date just is what we've spent in dollars to date, and then the contingency, that 13.63, that's the percentage of contingency against the revised budget. And then commitments in total, the 8.85% was a number I put in there so we could know, hey, where are we on our requirement? We have the requirement with the bond. And so I wanted to make sure, hey, I know what the dollars are, what's my percentage basis? And so those are there for reference. Like I said, on budget, we finished this budget update, and we actually overlapped. We're in late December. We started our schematic budget update, and so this is a real drive on our schematic designs are coming out here, being completed by North Hall and the design team for Central and Redmond. Those have already been turned over to Kirby, Nagelhout, and JLD, our cost estimator, and they're well into preparing their cost estimates. We get those cost estimates at the end of the month, or actually a couple weeks here, and then we start through a review process with the whole team. It'd be with the DPL team, with the Miller Hull design team, as well as our cost estimators, to really go through all of those cost estimates, look at them, because now they're tied to not just concepts, but to our real schematic designs, and they're much more detailed. Our cost estimating group, both Kirby and JLD, have had really good work sessions with Miller Hall and like structural engineer to really talk about what is the structural system and how is that going to go together so that it helps them understand it, to estimate it, and increase the accuracy of it. One of the other components that's going on right now with our schematic design and with our budgets is looking at, so we've now started putting on paper the size of the buildings. And I don't know if you remember when we look back all the way back to the original budgets that ACC did for Henneberry Eddy, there was a range, a high-low range in there on Central and Redmond, because the renovations, they're not going to change. But those two new buildings, there was a high and a low, and you know, we're not going to hit exactly on the high and exactly on the low, but in between there. And so as part of our schematic design process is Miller Hall has developed a set of plans that really define taking what the program is and what the needs are of DPL and saying, how do we solve that, put it into the building, and what's the right size of the building. And so we've been going through that process, and that's just a part of the schematic design process. It's part of the schematic design budgeting process. And so we have a fairly large contingency in Central right now, because it has the most flexibility in size of building that changes, because it's brand new, it's on a new piece of land, a lot more place, and it's the largest building and component. And so we've been looking at what is the right size of the building and what's that final cost. It's baked into the current numbers, but as we go through our schematic design phase, we're starting to refine that and say, okay, now we know this building's going to come in at X square feet because we made this adjustment, and that's happening right now, and will happen throughout this coming month as we go through the review of schematic design and review of schematic budgeting, cost estimating process, and then the commencement of design development, which for Miller Hull is that next phase of design where it just, they always are building and more detail, more information. One of the things that's really important for us to do is as we come out of schematic and start the design development is that we lock in our site plan, our floor plans, our building, what's the size of the box. All the details, the gingerbread that goes inside, that will continue to change throughout the course of design. But you want to make sure that you've got the right size, and that's the exercise that we've been going through right now. And so, nothing more than just kind of keep you up to date with what we're doing and process that will go on. Like I said, throughout the month of February, we'll be taking all of our schematic estimates and going through them again, refining, looking at our budget and updating again, so that in March we see another complete update to the whole program. Where do we sit? Where do we see the money needing to be? We're doing that with Central and Redmond, but we're also doing it with all the branches. We did initial concept budgets, and we're starting to do refined concept budgets. In December, we went out and awarded the CMGC package, and we'll talk about that of work today, for work package 4, which is the 4 branches. And having that contractor on board to do cost estimates, or part of their scope of work is to prepare a cost estimate for all of the branches for us, so that we can take their information and our cost estimators' information and really meld it together, look at it, and again, recheck our numbers for all the branches so that we know. Schematic design commenced in December for Sisters and Lapine. And so one of the things that we're able to share with the cost estimators is about a 50% schematic design, and it increases their accuracy in their estimate significantly. Because all of a sudden they've got a plan they can look at. They have more explanation of what's anticipated and what's in there. Like I said, we did a real deep dive on what's expected and planned for in downtown Bend and in Sun River, where we don't have schematic designs going yet. A real good work session with Miller Hall, able to really expand on beyond what's in their words in the concept package, what they're thinking and what answer and address questions. And it was really helpful, especially with Sun River, because of the amount of detail going into entryway and how that was going to be affecting what we would need to do in there and the mechanical systems. That's our most challenging renovation, more so than downtown Bend, I believe. It's a complicated little building that just its shape and everything. So it's not very doable, but it really, we need to do some really good planning on that one, so that when we go out there and start it, we've got it all figured out. And, the team's really doing well. So from a budget standpoint, that's kind of where I see us sitting right now. Draws are being processed, funding is being paid out. Predominantly is going to our design team at this point, and some of the consultants from that standpoint. Procurement, we will talk about separately of the award of the contract for the CMGC package 4, which is the branches to SunWest Builders. And then we also have the award of the commissioning package. And so I thought I'd go through the report and then touch base on those. There's summaries for both of those. Those were the predominant purchasing activities that were taking place in December and on in. As we move forward, that's going to slow down a little bit here. Our next major purchasing will be with our FF&E purchasing agent that will come out here in the coming months. Not too many others right away. On insurance, we have, and we've talked about this before, is that we're going to utilize a DSIP, which is the District Insurance Program. And it covers all of the projects. Brown and Brown, who's the district's broker, went out, secured pricing from the market, from a variety of vendors to build up all of the insurance package. They have shared that pricing with us and what the terms and conditions are. That's something that we're going throughout this month with DPL to talk about what are those premiums, what's the coverage, to be ready to bind. So that will come to you guys in February at the board meeting there, that we will have, a full summary, as always, what the cost is and our recommendation to move forward. And that'll be based on what Brown and Brown has provided to us. That's built into our current budgets, the cost of those things. So as we developed our budget update, one of those soft costs is insurance costs. And Brown worked with us on making sure that we are estimating the appropriate amount for liability insurance, builder's risk insurance, etc. On the entitlements, Central Library, we talked about that our text amendment was submitted. It was in December. We held the public hearing for the text amendment. That went fine. We had a number of community members, that were neighbors that came out to that. Brooks Resources put together a really nice presentation of information, and the team then presented. Mark Mixus on our side, along with Todd, did a lot of the presentation, and then Dale from Brooks Resources was there as our technical advisor and provided a lot of good information. But that went really well, and from that we were able then to submit documents to the city that we were required, and allowed them to deem our application complete. And so from that, we had a work session with them right after the new year with the city of Bend to talk about our application and the timing for it to move forward through the process. So staff will write up a staff report. It'll go to Planning Commission in February. And they're working on finalizing the date. There's a couple dates there. And so it'll go to the Planning Commission, and then from there it'll go to City Council in March and April time period. So that's tracking along our plan schedule. It was good that as we went through our meeting with staff, that when they deemed it complete, that they were very satisfied that the information is all there for them to make a decision on our request for the text amendment. Out of that, we also talked about the annexation process and continuing forward. So we have a working meeting with city staff and our design team, our project team, now set up every 2 weeks to talk about how we get from today to permits ready to start building, and all of the processes, the text amendment, the annexation, or site plan approval, which is really approval of our design and how we're going to use our master plan and everything else. So was very productive here in the last 3-4 weeks. Completion of the public hearing and responding to staff's requests for a couple of other pieces of information to get to a complete application. So very happy with how that's going along. The ODOT process is in conjunction with that. We spoke with the city about our ODOT agreement. Our traffic engineer, Transite, Joe Vestman, he does the traffic report in 2 pieces, a TFR and a TIA. And they're just short names for his overall traffic report. And it talks all about our traffic requirements, our impacts on the traffic system, and what we have to do. And that's a major component of our site plan approval, of our annexation. And it lays out what we have to do in the future, both with ODOT and with the city. So those reports both were completed throughout the month of December, and early January it was submitted right after the new year. and is in with both of those agencies, the city and ODOT. And so they're looking at them and moving forward. The city was very happy to hear we had an executed agreement with ODOT for our cooperative agreement. And so that's actually referenced in a component of the traffic report. So they know that we have a plan with ODOT of how we'll connect to the roundabout. I think that really made them happy to see that we had advanced that discussion, because that's always can become a problem if it's not in place for them to process and approve our application. So that component moving forward real well there. In Redmond, from a land use, I noted that, as we looked at the Redmond documents, the land documents, and one of them, there was a deed where the city deeded land that they own to the library back when the renovation, when I want to say it's around 2000, when we first moved in there. The deed itself had restrictions written into it of how the land could be used, and that it gave the city, if they wanted to, if we didn't use it exactly that way, to take it back. So we looked at it, and of course, with our change, the whole new design, we would be in total non-compliance with that. And so we met with the city and said, look, this deed says this, but we don't, we're gonna have to modify it. And our modification, our request is deed the land to DPL permanently with no restrictions, easements for utility lines and stuff, but basically turn the land over to the district. And happy to say that went before city council last night, and city council unanimously approved it with full support. So basically the library will now own 100% of the land and able to do what we'll do. We'll do a lot line adjustment there to create one single parcel, and city very supportive. I think there was just, they're very excited about the library. There is my take on last night's meeting. So they had some fun times on their own. Other issues within the city.
Get with us after the meeting, and we'll tell you about everything else.
Yes, yeah.
Ours was less than 5 minutes.
Yeah, it really was. So that was just good positive news, and that's behind us. That just lets us continue to move forward. Design, as I mentioned, our schematic designs. Formally, the 100% schematic design is issued the end of today. And so that'll be coming out, and we'll start a design review process that we go through over the next 2 weeks to review, comment, ask questions, and work with Miller Hall about what's in those designs. We see progress all the way up. And I think we've got on calendar the 28th, Miller Hall will be coming in and making a presentation to you all to go through those designs and show you where they're at and how it's looking. It's consistent with what you saw it conceptual. It's expanded, right? It's not changed, more information, more detail. So I think you'll be excited to see that, and it's looking good. And that's the set that we're again using for our budgeting process. As I mentioned, on the branches, Sisters and Lapine are about 50% through their schematic design, and they will finish that up in February. And they're staggered for the workload and for the process of reviewing them and looking at them and moving those right along. So I think from that standpoint, design is going really well. I think really good feedback happening between ownership and the design team, making sure that one, they're designing what ownership wants and what the district wants, and the district is doing a really good job of telling them and really expanding. That again goes back to that real good collaboration that we got going on, good information sharing and communication that I think is working really well. And it comes out in that we see things that we like, they adjust things we don't like. And, that's the design process. You find out what you like and don't like, and what you need or don't need. So excited about that. I think that's really everything in the monthly report. Maybe if there's questions about the monthly report, we address them. And then there's 3 more topics that I'll cover, which is the award of the work package for the award of the commissioning, and then a specific topic on lead certification. So any questions about? Yes.
There's one, I wanted to tell you, I so appreciate this little, I call it my crib notes, and this just puts it in perspective, and I don't have to look at that long. But in downtown Bend, I know, looking outside of HVAC's getting a little bit mad, but the underneath portion was flooded and things like that. Have you looked at all into hidden things that, because the building's older, or pollution, or things like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah,
This building. had a-
this building.
This was the one that was flooded.
Yes, yeah,
I
no,
thought
that
it was
one was,
that
yeah,
building.
yeah.
No.
That would have been.
Yeah.
Thankfully, no.
But,
I was gonna say, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
there actually are some things, so as we, through the concept phase, there was, an exploration, an investigation into the buildings and their condition and what's working. And so there's 2 elements over there. This end wall right behind us here, where there's a little outdoor patio, there's been a continual water intrusion problem there that we've identified. That's going to be part of our scope to help figure out why it's happening and how do we fix it. I don't know that it's a big leak problem. It's a leak and material issue with some of the windows that are in the building that they're hard to replace. There's been some issues up there with some leakage. We looked at the mechanical systems and how are they functioning. That's a big component of the building that wears out over time. And so we did, as part of our initial investigation back in the month of August, September, and into October, to really define the concept designs, which is concept scope of work, incorporated a lot of those elements. I don't think we have a lot of big problem issues to solve in Bend, downtown Bend here, but we have a few of those just functional, like those components. Outside of that, it's going to be about how we use the building in the new shape, the new configuration of the interior space.
And I have one more, just clarification. When you look at the numbers and you were talking about the cost, say the branches, the subtotal, the original budget was 6.7 million, now it's 13.1. Where does that money come from? Does it all come out of the contingency portion, or you just shuffle the money around?
So it came from, and I missed one piece that I want to go back to. I just realized I didn't say it. So it comes from reallocating between the budgets of where they had and the original reserves. So over under the original budget, there was a 32,754,000 under reserve contingency. It's right near the one. And in the new one, that's down to 1.1 million. And that's because it's been moved into, so a lot of it was allocating contingency. Some of it was where there may have been some monies up in some of the other projects that it wasn't necessarily fully needed there, but we needed more down there. So it was a reallocation between the two and an allocation of reserves. One of the things that you'll see is, and it shows up on page 2 of my cost report, is the sources of funds. And I apologize, I didn't point this out. Is that under the revised budget there, you see that there's interest on bond investments of 330,000. That's a projection that was provided to us by Piper Sandler of what interest we're going to earn on bond investments right now. Now, that's also set aside in a contingency fund, not planned for expenditure on the previous page because they may or may not be materialized, right? We don't know, but we're starting to track that. The other one is donations and grants. And so the overall budget was increased by $5 million. And that $5 million is anticipated donations and grants that DPL is receiving and getting from the community. Now, those dollars are actually planned. So within each budget for each project, we planned certain aspects, and the donations could apply to just about anything. But one of the things we knew is that there's some areas in early learning and youth areas for enhancements. They're not really necessarily the building, but they're components. They're not furniture, but they're things. I want to call them playthings, especially for the kids.
Like installation.
Things that they will be utilized and in there. And it's there's budgets set up for each of them. That's one of those elements that wasn't really anticipated in the early planning of, hey, what's that as a dollar amount? But we've identified it as a need, a scope of the work. And we said, let's generate additional funds through donations because of the interest out there. And so this budget recognizes that our total cost is going up by that 5 million with a source of funds, not from our bond funds, but from our donations. And as we go through the process, we have to track that separately. And we talked about this with bond counsel last spring, when we went through the kind of rules and regulations and everything that we had to do with, and because at that time we talked about that, hey, chance that we'll have donations. And they said, well, you can have them, you got to track costs and funding separate. And so that'll be a process that we go through in more detail so that we can show the accountant. DPL has an accounting firm that will be doing audits on some basis to really look at how we're tracking, spending the funds and that we're tracking. So something I just went right past.
So are you saying you actually allocated the 5 million that need in different projects already?
Yes. So in our cost forecast,
Right.
each building, we went through and we talked about these enhanced elements. And Miller Hall helped us look at and say, hey, here's what we think you would spend in each building based on its size, on what it would be. Now, that's something that's not designed yet. We actually have a visioning meeting between DPL and Miller Hall coming up here in the coming month to really talk about what will those elements be.
Because I've seen in other constructions is donors are approached to say, okay, we need something for children's. We don't have it into the construction budget of the bond. Would you donate $50,000 or whatever you want to donate for this specific purpose? It's not allocated into any specific project until the end. And then you can account for because the donations came in, you have the money that allocated for a specific purpose, which the donors like. All right. I haven't seen in the past where donors will give you money and say, yeah, I'm going to do it for children's services somewhere. They usually say, this is my library, or this is my community, this is where I want to donate to. If it's, the Pine, we're going to donate to Sisters, they're going to have second thoughts about this. Right, they're not altruistic. They don't look at it as a whole. So I'm wondering, do you really want to allocate those funds now because they don't exist, rather than waiting until the donations come in and we see a deficit, that you can then go out and ask for that funding? Because ask for it now, It's like asking people to pay taxes for something they don't know where it's going.
Yeah, I think the way I looked at it was, we've got a vision of what we want to create. And we have a order of magnitude of, hey, we think this is going to be, $3 million here and $1 million here and 500,000 there, what that is. Now, we have to determine what that specific thing is, right? What is that? And that's the visioning that will take place. We started out with, hey, we think it's this order of magnitude in cost, and therefore we would need to generate donations in this order of magnitude. We did put the buckets in the different projects, so we kind of knew what the magnitude would be in each project. They're in there, they're in separate line items in our detailed budget, so we know where they're at. They're not really allocated into the FF&E budget. They're outside of our FF&E budget. They're not in our construction budget. It's a owner item. So it's defined at a very high level at the moment. We have X amount planned for donations based on an X amount planned for an expenditure. As we go through the visioning process with DPL and Miller Hall, to really talk about, okay, what does this really mean? What are the components? Because I think you got to do that to understand what is it in order to really be able to share with the community to say, these are the types of things we're doing that you would be supporting through your donations. So we have to go through that visioning process, but that will help to then refine the budgets and say, do we have the right amount of money in the right bucket? Or do we want to move some of it, which would actually take place over the coming months? I think the other piece of donations, and Chantal, if I say anything wrong, please correct me, is that I think the donations are planned, but with a certain amount of flexibility for DPL to use the fund donations as needed for the project. I don't think that they would be like an absolute lock. I'm buying this piece, and maybe that it will be that way, but
I think there's a mix of it.
Yeah, and so one thing, when you're running a capital fundraising program, there are different levels of donors, of course, and so at the highest level, I've personally reached out to 2 major donors who have shown some interest. And they're very interested in the full project. So they're not about like, oh, I'm only going to give to a fine, or I only want to give it a downtown Bend. They're very much about, they understand how important the whole project is and that how Central serves all of the small branches and what downtown Bend will be for Bend, et cetera, and East Bend. So with that in mind, something like the early learning spaces are so desirable because all branches will have one. And it serves children and families, which is always a good heartstring, of course. And so so these larger donors are really excited about a big project like that they can sink their teeth in. So I feel pretty comfortable and confident that, putting aside money specifically for those early learning spaces that will serve all of the branches and all those families will do very, very well with those very top donors. And then, Ray, what you're talking about maybe is at a smaller, lower level where we're really targeting the different donors and just kind of more everyday citizens who love the library. We will find smaller things that they can do to really enhance the Sisters Library, but it'll be at a much smaller level. So it's like you have 3 tiers that you work with. And I think what we're really identifying right now is the high tier. And grants also like that high tier as well to serve the most people that they can. So they really love to see programs like our early learning centers, which if you remember years back, we got the OCF grant that targeted each branch because they love that we were hitting every single community within Deschutes County. So that's kind of where in my brain and working with our new fundraiser, we're looking at for that $5 million.
Like at the high level, be
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think that the overall concept, the overlay over all of this is a summary. There's a lot of detail underneath this, and I think that we can trust our owner's rep, our grants management system, our accounting system, that they're accounting for those dollars appropriately and that they've got them placed into categories that make sense. And they may show up as a single figure here in this summary, but they've got them where they need to be.
Yeah, my concern is when we allocate it now, if we don't get it,
right.
now what do we do? Whereas if we don't allocate it now, it's like premium. Ooh, now you have this thing, extra funds that you can do things with and allocate it where you need them and setting your own priorities, right, for what the system needs. But if we put it in here and you're saying, my question was, you're putting it in different project sites,
And what.
that I
what's
have a
inter-
problem with.
One thing around that, which is interesting, so I went out back in the fall to talk to two of these donors. And they wanted to see a full budget. And at that time, it was still premature, and they said, we want to see it in the budget of what you are needing. They want to see that we are fully committed to
Okay.
it, right? So, because they won't give us a penny unless they know this is really needed and it's
Mhm.
fully committed. If we're on that fence of like, well, we can pull it out if we don't get the money, they won't give us the money.
Yeah.
But if they see like, oh, this is part of your program,
Right.
and this is essential to the libraries, they will give us the money. So that's why having it in like that, there is risk a little bit, yes, for us in case they don't give us that money, yes, for sure. But more so, we won't get that money because they don't see us as really being bought into like, this is an essential
Right.
thing that we need.
There's,
So it's a kind of a,
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. What I'm just saying is instead of allocating to the individual buildings, put it in as a need, that we need an early learning center funding as a separate line item, rather than breaking it into a separate building project. Which means you're gonna have to take it back out later and readjust it. It's a lot more work, and it could set it up for us to make a mistake somewhere. And with grants, you can't beat it off. But this allows us to have a pot that says, for early learning, for whatever, right, for senior services. We have this pot of money for that, or we can aggregate it all. We've done that in the past, where it's just for needs, open need of the library, to do bigger furniture. And have that as a separate item. What I'm concerned with is to actually allocate it into each different project at this time. Because it says, sooner or later, you're gonna have to readjust it.
Right.
It's more work. And it can get confusing.
Yeah.
If the money's there, we think the money's higher for a particular project. And we may never go there.
For me, Ray, I do like having it in the project so that we're thinking about how are we making sure that we have the money, but how are we distributing it to every branch?
Okay.
And that we're truly thinking about the individual branches, because sometimes we want to make sure, okay, we're not focused on one big one, right? And that we're truly, it's across the board. So that was my thinking behind it, is to really look at that. I went, when I talked to Miller Hall about it, I said, look, you got it. You can't tell me one number. You gotta tell me what you think each building needs, so that we're thinking that way all along. It'll be something that, as we go through this process, so like we'll go through the visioning process here in January, in February, after we go through this visioning process of what it's going to be, Miller Hall will help go through and say, okay, the numbers that we allocated to each building, are they still valid? Are they still realistic on what we think based on understanding? And if we do need to move them between them, we would do that, but I actually don't want to have one big pot, because I think it can then get gobbled up by the big projects too easy.
So
I want to force that we're gonna put money aside for every building.
Okay, good.
And I think we always have to force it. And that was, you know, in this reconciliation, why you saw a lot of money get pushed down into the branches. It's because they need it and they deserved it, and we want to get that money properly allocated so that there's a really good distribution of scope of work, which I think we have identified through our concept planning and our concept budgeting. And we'll keep continuing to go through that. And
So we really make commitments to each one of the projects
yes,
for specific purposes.
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay,
You
any
have
other
more
questions? Any other questions about Grace's report?
Oh, I have a lot, but you have the time.
Well, I think we're running behind us now, but if there are pressing questions that you got.
Well, I just want to make sure the collection cost for adding collections, that was in the language of the bond, right?
Yes.
Good.
And there was a budget in there, and like all budgets, we're evaluating that budget as to. One of the things I've learned, collections are driven off of space, volumes, right, of space. How much can you put into a facility? And so as our design gets refined, our collections get refined. And it's like all things, it'll continue to update and refine
Taking it down electronics.
and of what we're gonna be buying in there. And it's a very significant component to the overall program.
That is, what can we actually do at East Bend? Because it's a rental, the landlord owns it. I remember we had the discussion of whether we were going to take particulate capturing in the HVAC system. For magnetic.
So we're going through, a lot of it is an interior renovation to really reposition how the space is being used in a more efficient way, which was shown in those concept drawings of really, and that configuration. So we're spending the money on the interior of the building, which is our space to use. We're not spending it on the exterior other than how we deal with our book drops. We're spending it on our furniture systems, our control systems for MEP and energy efficiency and that kind of thing, our lighting. So it's really focused around those elements. The mechanical systems, things that are landlord owned, that we, you know, not necessarily can change out without their approval, but there's things that we may look at with landlord approval. Can we modify and improve this system? I think if we're paying for it, the landlord is going to say, go ahead all day long, right?
Right.
But we're going to use it for a long term. And so we'll look at those to make sure. But we do try to be careful about, you know, going too far into the landlord's building
Oh, yeah.
and
You know,
taking on a responsibility that is theirs,
Right.
but also making sure that but it's really an interior renovation focus.
So at some point, we'll probably have a breakout on the smaller project, what each one is going to cost, because East Bend, obviously, there's only a maximum we can do there.
Right.
So
We
that'll be very
do in
small.
our detailed report, and all of our cost estimating is by location. And so the summary report again brings it together. But yes, we have separate estimates for each individual branch for all components of like the FF&E and the construction costs, those major.
Can we get a breakout on those, on these reports? I know it's more data, but it literally allows us, instead of aggregating what is it, 3 projects, 4 projects.
Yeah.
Do we need that?
Is that the, is
Well, at some
that,
point, we're gonna have it. I'm not sure you even have it yet, but at some point, when you do have those breakouts, I'd like to see it as individual.
I mean,
Even though it's
that
congregated
information
in one.
is in there. I would need to figure out how do I separate it all out in a report to do that. So I'll take a look at that and go through that with Todd, what that would be to do. Because one of the values of packaging it was around trying to keep it
The bid on it.
a large project. And
Right.
we're asking them to give us a breakout so we can see, but at the same time, we're trying to also keep it into one package. So I'll take a look at that.
Yeah, I think for me it'd be helpful. Oh, can we actually, what's preventing us from increasing the square footage actually for the mining system?
Money.
Just money.
Money, parking would become, we'd have to look at parking. That's always one thing that's driven off of square footage, but money is really the issue. The original budgets didn't anticipate an increase. They captured a couple of alcoves where there was little indentations that were infilling and making it usable space, but those are, 100 square feet here, 200 square feet here, that really isn't going to drive a change on our parking and anything with the city, because it was probably captured in the gross square footage as covered space, and we're just making it interior.
So there's not actually anything structural about the building
No.
that prevent us from moving.
They're just infill walls on the outside. It won't change how the building stands or structurally. It becomes non-bearing wall.
Oh, yeah.
But
Just
yeah,
like my
so
house.
there was, and it wasn't a lot, but it was a couple of little alcoves. One of them was, a really good add-on for Lapine, where it was a space that really wasn't being utilized well, and it will be a good addition of storage space for the library on the inside.
The last question, what other pieces of information were requested by the city planning staff? You said there were other pieces of information you needed.
On the central library, so it was there's a sign-off sheet that comes from the public hearing, a copy of the deed, and then the other one was a document that,
Or just minor paperwork?
what's that?
Just minor paperwork?
Okay.
There's they asked for the traffic, we sent you the traffic study.
Yeah, there was 3 components. It was the sign up of the public hearing, the deed from the land purchase, and then the other one was a document that Brooks Resources or HWA had, which was one of a site plan or one of the studies that they had prepared where they wanted a copy of it. I don't even remember specifically what it was, because Brooks Resources said, we already have this. They just didn't give it to them yet. Yeah. And it really wasn't a significant issue. And just like the deed, it's like why they wanted to see the deed to the property, but they did.
Check off the box.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. The one that was really of the 3 was the public hearing document, which it wasn't a complicated document. It's a document that gets signed by the homeowners association. That hearing was held and they were able to attend, and so it was something really simple to do.
Attendance record.
Yes.
Present.
Okay. Well, do we want to talk about commissioning services?
Yeah, so in here is a request for approval. So we went through the process of selecting a commissioning agent who will perform the commissioning services. I did a summary there in broad shape. The commissioning agent is an owner's representative. So they work for us and they perform a couple of different functions. When we talk about commissioning, what they're commissioning is the mechanical system, the lighting system, the control system, the plumbing system. And this is a code-driven requirement, but it's also a quality control-driven. And so during the design phase, they review the architect and mechanical engineer's plans for us. They comment on them, on their completeness, accuracy, and what they're designing. So they act as a peer reviewer on our behalf to make sure that we're getting. They will look at the energy models. And energy models is a model that the mechanical engineer generates to tell us this system, this mechanical system is going to generate this much power or usage, and what power it's going to use, how efficient it is, and is that the right system to use, all electric, gas electric, or what different components and what it's like. It's a very technical aspect of it. I can sit there and read that report and somewhat understand it. These guys can read it and they write them, they understand them technically. So they act as our advocate to really understand and help tell us what the engineers are proposing are good, sound choices. They will also look at it and say, have you considered this? Have you considered that? So that during the design phase, they do that. They work with Miller Hall, the architect, on writing the commissioning specifications. And these will go into Miller Hall's specification book to tell the contractor and the subcontractors, here's what we're going to commission and here's how we're going to commission it. And that is, how are we going to test all the systems at the end of the project to verify that they are installed correctly, they're running at the anticipated level of whether it's, you know, CFM on the air flows and the temperatures and how it's functioning. It's meant to verify that these systems are operating at the highest efficiency possible. So this goes back to energy efficiency and energy efficient buildings. And so it's one of those components that, and it's built into the building code now that you have to do it. In the past, it was always voluntary. And so they go through and commission and test that. And so that's their role. They will do inspections throughout construction. They'll meet directly with the contractor and the subcontractor. They review submittals and shop drawings, which are the documents that contractors produce that go into the architect and the design engineer to sign on. But our commissioning agent also looks at them as a second set of eyes. So it really is a additional quality control mechanism for the benefit of the owner and meets the requirements of the state in our code. So we put together an RFP, wrote up a detailed scope of work and contracts, went out and secured proposals on that. And those proposals were then evaluated by an evaluation team in the same process and format that we've done all of our evaluations. And you can see the results of the scoring. The commissioning companies that responded to our RFP were very broad in location. We had a company out of Texas, company out of California, Washington, couple out of Oregon here. We had one firm who is actually recommended or highest ranked, which is Systems West. They have an office here in Bend. They also have an office over in Springfield. And you can see they as the highest ranked of the five and who is recommended. I think one of the things that really stood out to the evaluation team as we went through and did our evaluations and looked at scoring was their knowledge of Central Oregon projects. You know, we have a very different environment here than many other places. We're not like the Valley, we're not like the coast, and we're not like the Southwest. We're Central Oregon, and you know, I think they understood that because they have a very strong presence here. And as we went through their approach of how they execute the work that we defined in the scope, is, you know, they take a much higher detailed level of approach to it. It's not a cursory review, it's an in-depth review. And so those were things I think that resonated with the evaluation committee in their scoring and why we saw their scores and their interview score were quite high, and they are not the least expensive. And we're not really trying to find who's the cheapest, we're finding who's the best value. Because these are people who help to make sure that we get what we're wanting and expect, you know, in the quality of the design and the quality of the workmanship. And I think their systems that they proposed and their approach to executing the work really resonated with the group, and why we saw them end up being the highest rank. So, I don't know if there's other questions about that. Hopefully I summarized what their role is. They're a very technical group, but they're a very important consultant that we bring on board. They will actually, their first commencement is with the schematic design to start looking at it. We get them involved right away early while they can influence change.
Any questions?
So if we don't get a certificate of occupancy, it's their fault.
No, but you know what? It is a requirement of certificate of occupancy to have it commissioned. If we don't pass commissioning, it's generally because of the contractor. But the way they manage their commissioning process, we should not have an issue when we get to the actual testing, because they go through a very detailed pre-check system through. And I think also Kirby, or CMGC, is very adept at understanding the requirements of this. To be ready to execute, because they understood that. So that's my point.
Any other questions?
Who's B2S would be?
They are out of Long Beach, California.
Oh, wow.
They do have an office up in Seattle. So they were, again, they were traveling in Systems West. The people that are going to work on the project are living here in Bend. Truly readily available to be out on site whenever we need them.
Any other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve awarding the contract to Systems West Engineer and authorizing Todd to finalize negotiations.
So moved. Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Good.
The next one is the CMGC work package 4, which is for the 4 branches. We went out and issued that RFP in November, secured proposals. We ended up with 2 proposals. We had 5 firms attend the pre-bid meeting, which was a mandatory meeting, and in the end, only 2 turned in proposals. Both were they're very competent contractors, Pence Construction and SunWest Builders. Both participated in the work package 1 and work package 2 and continued. Kirby Nagelhow did attend the pre-bid meeting, but I think that they realized they have their focus on work package 1 and work package 2. And so they chose not to submit anything. They didn't tell us, which was quite all right. But I think, you know, both of these firms are extremely capable of doing it and understanding what we needed. And as we went through, again, that same process, same evaluation process that we've used for all of them, SunWest really rose above Pence in this case. They're local here. Pence has a local office and works here. SunWest has been here for a long time. SunWest had a real depth of renovation experience locally here in Central Oregon, and kind of their strategy, their approach, their team that they proposed on it resonated strongly with the evaluation team. And I would say both of them are extremely competent and capable of doing the work. But in the end, SunWest is the highest ranked finalist and who we would proceed with awarding in the contract. On that one. So I don't know if there's any specific questions about it.
How much experience does SunWest have on larger renovation government projects?
Actually, from a volume size, significant. I don't think any of these projects, they were a strong contender on Redmond. I think they finished in the third or fourth spot right there. As far as that, they were one of the ones that we interviewed. But, when you look at their business model and what they do, for them to do a $25 million project is not unheard of. I think they have a lot of volume of work in the 1 million to 15 million range when you look at it. And because they do a lot of work throughout this valley, and not all of our projects are big. And so they don't just chase the big jobs, they service the community very broadly. And I think that was really strong. They understand how to do a smaller project, which our branches are, as compared to a Redmond or Central. So very, very capable.
For this one, and probably we should have done it for the last one, if you have a recommended not to exceed amount, that would be helpful for our motions. Sorry, I didn't catch that when you sent them out.
Yeah. So for this one, the recommended not to exceed amount.
And you have an estimated cost of work on the back of this of $6,221,000.
Yeah, that's the estimated construction cost. What we normally approve is on the, is the pre-construction fees, because that's what we're awarding the contract now. When we do the GMP, will come back for approval. But I would put that at 300,000,
Not to exceed.
not to exceed 300,000
On which one?
on the current one, or SunWest Builders. I'm not expecting that it'll change. Really, their fee is 282,000 represented there. And I'm not seeing any significant changes there. Go back on the commissioning and with Systems West, I would put that not to exceed at 450,000.
And my apologies to the board, I did not.
So who made the motion on who made the motion on the, okay, would you care to amend your motion?
Certainly, I would do the very best I can. I make a motion to accept the RFP number 21-22/10 commissioning services for Systems West, and cost not to exceed 450,000.
And that includes withdrawing the previous
Yes.
motion? That, okay.
That's it.
Do I hear a second on that? Let's vote on that one first. Okay, all those.
To
in-
clarify, that's their total cost, it's not rate.
Yeah, that's for all of the projects for the commissioning. That covers all projects.
So, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, so we got that one done. So do we have a motion on work package 4? The language is. And then next to the last paragraph on the second page. To authorize the executive director to finalize negotiations and execute contracts with SunWest Building to provide CMGC services, the work package for at a cost not to exceed $300,000. Okay. So we have a second on that one?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay, motion passes. You got what you need on those?
Yep.
Okay.
The last item I had was I gave you a summary about lead certification. And I tried to kind of write where we started and where we're at today, but just to quickly summarize, when we first came on the project and got going, and we started talking about what big goals were for the project, and also what we needed to put into our RFQ and RFP for the design team. And one of them was about the importance of sustainability and efficiency, and lead certification was one of those items that came up. And at that time, we went through, and I don't remember if you guys recall, but we spoke about it with some of you, and you weren't there at the time, that we were not going to pursue a certification by lead, but we were going to pursue a lead certified design. And what that was is that we would design to a lead level, which was lead silver. And in part because as the industry has really changed, the building codes have risen to where often as to meet codes, you're meeting the lead requirements. So we wrote into the architect's scope of work that they're to design to a minimum of lead silver, that they are to track with the lead scoring system to evaluate. And this is a self-evaluation by us as ownership and our design team and our contractor, that we are meeting these through our selection. In selecting Miller Hall, one of those elements that we, as part of the interview process and the proposal that they gave us, was what their philosophy was on design, for sustainable buildings, for environmental concerns, and how they approach it. And they, as a basis of how they operate their business, and if you go to their website, they tell you about this, and they told us about this in their proposal and in their interview, the importance they put on designing buildings to create buildings that are very sustainable, that are environmentally friendly, and that they think about and proactively design to meet those goals, meet energy efficiency. And so that was all part of how we proceeded forward. We have goals. There's a part out there with the Energy Trust. One, we have a requirement to spend 1.5% on renewable energy. Our goal is, can we get to net zero? Net zero says that you produce as much energy as you use. Now, you're still always connected to the grid, to the system, because sometimes you're producing more than you need and it flows into the grid, and sometimes you produce less and you pull from the grid. But as a whole, net zero. And so that's one of our goals that we have. Again, it's along the lines of LEED and that philosophy of how you design and build a building that ultimately Robert gets to operate and continue that process forever as you work through that. As we presented the conceptual designs to the various committees and groups, throughout the past months, there's been some questions asked of us. We see you're doing this. You tell us you're doing it. We hear it all. But why aren't you going to go get certification? Why don't you go get the piece of paper? So they challenged us on this. We explained to them what our process was. Same thing I'm telling you, the same thing we told them, and what our goals were and how we were planning to accomplish that. they still challenged us. And, you know, we felt it was a big enough issue that we should share that with you, that there are some community members that feel that it's important to get the certification. It doesn't come for free. As you can see, I put a range in there. We haven't actually priced it out. We would actually go hire another consultant, a lead consultant, who would help us process all of the documentation. To actually receive the lead certification, you have to document and show lead all of the things that we're tracking and that we're saying we're doing. We prove it to them. And then in the end, they say, okay, you're certified, here's your certification. And it's a certificate that can be handed. And so it's really a question of, right now, we're continuing to proceed along our original basis, which is, we're not going to seek a certification, a formal certification, but we're going to design to that level. I looked at our excuse me, current lead scorecard. So Miller Hall provides it to us with each design iteration of all the points, what they are, what they think. Currently, we're at, so in there you have accepted, pending, or potential points, and points that we're not going to get, right, to evaluate. And so we're currently at a lead silver in their, you know, scoring. We have probably enough points to get to lead gold in our pending, which may or may not happen. And we won't actually know until we get completely into construction documents. But, you know, so I look at it and say, okay, we're doing the things that we said we would do. We're going to design to this. It's going to be a critical component of our design. And we're going to score ourselves, and it's the same score sheet that we would mail in. And we're going to score that sheet every design iteration. So in the 100% schematic design that comes out tonight will be the final score sheet for schematic design. And we'll do it again at DD and again at CDs, so that we can hold ourselves accountable and we can feel that we truly did what we said we would do. And we designed facilities that really meet these goals. So the question we have for you all is what your thoughts are on that. Are we following a, you know, direction that you feel comfortable with? Or if you would like to see us make a change. And that change would be to do the formal submittal with lead and secure a formal certification. It's something that if we're going to do that, we would want to implement it very soon, because you have to start collecting information and just getting it ready and engaging with the lead consultant. And they'll work with us all the way through the project. And so that's why this is in front of you today, and what the background is. So to the extent you guys have questions, yes.
What does the $100,000 to $250,000? What does that encompass? Where does that money go to out of our budget then to get the LED certification?
Most of it is spent with a lead consultant
So that's, the money would go to pay for the.
to pay for them. And then the other part is going to go, majority, there's two main components of them and our design team. Our design team has to do more work than they would otherwise to assemble and prepare documents for submittal, and then process them and address responses. The lead consultant helps collect everything, organize it, and submits it, then communicates with lead and brings it back to us.
And Greg, gold would be more expensive because the volume of work would be more?
No, it's really about the products and systems that we choose. Now, sometimes as you go up, if you seek a gold, or the furthest level is platinum. So they have one below silver, it's called standard, but then silver, and then gold and platinum. And so those are really driven off, what do we do in our building? Now, I will say, if you push to like a platinum to a high gold, that can drive cost up because it's gonna limit a bit of what you're doing and how you're doing it. And sometimes it says, okay, you're not gonna buy anything no further than 500 miles from your job site, you know, to reduce on trucking and that. Well, unfortunately, we have to buy products that are outside of Central Oregon. Those are things, that's just one small example.
We'll never get platinum.
Yeah.
And
That's-
especially in the supply line today.
It's like buying anything, it's like you take what you can get.
Yes.
Well,
But not quite,
I think we're doing really
So-
good with, definitely with silver and a very
right.
reasonable.
So the question is, do we want to budget this amount of money out of the total to go for LEED certification?
My comment more than anything else is, we have to, I guess, address the taxpayers. They're the ones paying for this. It does sound like, to me, LEED is a bit of bureaucracy for what we get. However, you spent 20 minutes telling us about, at least, about how you're designing to the LEED standards, but you can't put that on a plaque as you walk in that door. As a taxpayer, I see, I'm not gonna read all that or believe you if you said you did to that design, but I've heard of LEED. I probably know some buildings that are built like that, and I've read some articles perhaps, and I walk in and see LEED certified building, then perhaps I'm a little more proud of my money spent. Those are just my comments on the importance of this bureaucratic, whatever they've got going. I'm not sure how the rest of the.
No, I agree.
feels about that.
I agree. I mean, this is about 0.1% of our total budget. I'm gonna spend more on this on commissioning costs or somebody else, right, just for our own protection. This is to let the public know that we actually did, that the LEEDs organization has certified us, saying we did it, not just us saying, trust me, we did it. But there you got me.
And that is one question I've gotten from several people is, are you going to be LEED certified? And so I think that is out there amongst the community. And I think it's very, very important, as you said too, Greg, that the groups that we've been, interacting with, but that's very important to them as well. So,
It also ensures that our architects and contractors are doing what they say they're going to do. The third party is actually looking, granted it's paperwork, but they can come in and inspect and say, where did you buy this from?
Right.
And what are the standards have they met? I don't know what the latest ISO standards are, but that you're meeting these.
Yeah. Personally, I feel that, one, I don't think that we will get anything different by saying we're going to certify it from our team, because I believe we have a real true commitment in our team broadly, and that's from ownership on down, to really pursue what's right and to design buildings. And this will be for Central and Redmond. I would not try to do this with the renovations because it's so hard on a renovation to go back and change the old building. I would only recommend doing it on the two new buildings that you can really do it on. But I think that, we had a discussion about this because I knew we were going to talk about it. I talked to the architect yesterday and the team. I know they're extremely committed to meeting our goals and stuff, but they believe in the whole process. So I think it's really an ownership call of what you would like to do as all of us as consultants and advisors to you, we can execute this.
Cynthia, do you have a comment?
Well, I guess the most important thing to me is that the building is going to be as sustainable as possible. And if the architects and the contractors and the people who are involved believe in that, that's what's most important. Is there an advantage to becoming a LEED building?
You know, outside of public goodwill, people being able to see it, no. The actual certification doesn't make your building better at all, but it does say somebody that the process of verification occurred. I think that as LEED came out 20 plus years ago and got going, early on, it was something that really had a bigger impact. I will say, most of our private world type projects, we designed the LEED standards, but a lot of owners just don't want to take the time and money to pursue the certification. But it's really an individual ownership choice to do that. But it is something that it's what you can present to the community to say, here's what we did.
And I think it's significant investment in our communities of Redmond and Warren that I think a LEED certification would really give the message that we're committed to doing the best possible building for our community.
So we have to really ultimate ownership, it's not us.
Right.
Yeah, and I think this gets back kind of to community values and aligning ourselves with what's important in our communities, in our region, and I think this is a real value. And that's one reason entities are so public about saying, we have this LEED certification. I mean, it's a big deal here. So to me, if we're doing all the work anyway, I mean, to make this possible, I think it makes sense to me to go for the certification because I think it's a source of community pride. And I think it does signal value that people are getting good quality, sustainable buildings for their tax dollars. These are big projects and we want people to come away feeling like they built good buildings with that money.
I know that Sisters High School is LEED certified. And the Sisters School District helps the devil out of that. It is, their advertising and all says, and again, it's probably 99% bureaucratic, but they put that on a lot of their advertising. That it's just LEED certified. And so I think the people at Sisters appreciate that and respect it.
Parks and Rec also.
I have a comment that's not going to help you in any way.
All right.
And that is just that I don't think as staff we had a strong feeling either way about this. It's just, it did come up in community conversations, and that's where I thought we never really sat down and delved into this, and that's why I asked Greg to write up a summary. And the part that's not going to help you is we will build a great building either way.
Right.
But I think I really felt like this was an important one that the board needed to have a philosophical discussion one way or another.
Right. Chantal, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just in those conversations, what kept coming across, they trusted us that we were going to build the very best building we could build. They understood that. But the message that came across was, you all have an opportunity to be an example for generations to come as a public entity, and beyond that as a library, which is such a community center, that for you all to come out and say, this is really important to all of our communities. It's even more important, they felt, than like other public agencies coming out. And that we would have a teaching opportunity, which we have no matter if we're LEED certified or not. We would definitely want to teach people about our building, about our green roof, and about all these great elements. But having that LEED certification behind it can kind of be that opener and that. So, and it was mainly the environmental center, but talking to Mike a lot, and he just said, be the example. And that's how good change can happen when you guys have that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that really resonates. And we had talked early on when we were putting together the RFPs and the RFQs for the architectural services. We discussed LEED, but we didn't say this is a definite thing. So I don't, what,
Well, let me ask you this one thing though. What would it take to get to these goals?
To what?
To get to the goal level?
That's really looking at our design and looking at the points that we have available that are still not committed points, but are possible points. And they will take us into a goal level, is to evaluate each of those. And I think that's going to happen no matter what. Is that we'll look at them and say, does this add value? Is it a good option? Is it something we can achieve? Because it has to be achievable. And does it work within our budget? We have to, balance all. So no, right now they're pursuing as many points as possible. But with a group of points still to be determined.
that could be something that you could always come back to us
Mm-hmm.
with
Yeah.
at a later date.
There-
It's
there
to say,
really-
we're just a click off of this, so.
Yeah.
Do you want to spend the extra money to go over that?
And that's something I think that we will pursue no matter what. What we told them, it was a minimum level. And believe me, Miller Hall would love to design us a platinum.
Yeah.
They are believers in it.
Yeah.
And, they like to promote that on their side, right? So I think that we will look at what can we achieve. I think today it's really about whatever level we are at, that we pursue or not pursue the certification.
Do we have to achieve the same level in both buildings?
No, it can be both different. They will be independent and stand on their own. It will just be certifying both of them.
So in the future, in that cost budget analysis and design, you may come up with saying Redmond can be gold and Central would be
Absolutely.
platinum. And that would be really good too.
No, I think they
It's
will.
not all or nothing.
They will be independent of each other, and because they are very different buildings, they are going to have different, the ability to achieve levels will be individualized.
Will a smaller building or be more achievable?
Yes, it actually will be. The larger building and its shape probably makes it a little bit more, but not significantly.
So does anyone want to make a motion on this?
I think Greg is asking for a consensus, a feeling from the board.
Yeah, and I
When they go up, you
don't
have to do it.
actually know if it's a motion or just, how that
Actually, I
actually
would
works.
like to have the board just, it doesn't need to be I would like some type of motion the board votes on, such as we will pursue LEED standard. And we will be back to you, obviously, we'll be back to you if that passes. Because we'll have to hire consultants to do that.
And I would say not necessarily LEED standard, but LEED certification.
LEED
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
LEED certification,
And that's-
I don't think.
Then the standard level we will establish.
Right.
Right now, we've already set that at silver.
Yeah.
And we may pursue a gold or a platinum if we, for some reason, were able to get that.
Yeah,
So we just pursue LEED certification, but not state what level or.
Right.
Because we're currently already contracted for a LEED silver minimum. And so I wouldn't want to change that with Norfolk.
I would,
I was gonna make the motion
Go.
that the board move forward in securing a lead accreditation or certification in both the Redmond and New Central Library.
You want a second, Bunny?
I'll say,
Okay. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Right.
I appreciate you bringing this to us.
Yeah.
Give us that opportunity to make that call.
Absolutely. No, and I think it was something that the team here really listened to the community and made us rethink our original direction.
Appreciate that.
So I think it's a good testament to our openness. Whole team.
Yeah.
So I think I'm done.
Okay.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next up, we've got equity, diversity, and inclusion coaching
Yeah,
proposal.
so I shared with you the memo that Jennifer sent me, and kind of to step back a bit, we have been working on improving equity, diversity, and inclusion within the library, and that it's wide spanning. It's first of all, it's how are we treating our staff, but ultimately it's how are we treating our public as well. As you may recall, we hired a consultant, Viva Asmalash, last year, kind of did an analysis of our system and came back with some great recommendations for us. And the first big one, which I agree with, was really that we kind of had to start from the top and start working with all of our managers and supervisors, everybody that supervises an employee. And really get some in-depth training on how we can improve and move forward. And so to that end, we put out an RFQ for those services. And Jennifer's here with us. She was on the committee that looked at that. And they came back with some recommendations. And as you can see, it's a price tag that's higher than my authority. And it's something that I wanted to bring to the board. It's something that I think would be of great value to our district. Something that is, we've heard very strongly in our community, that it's a value in our community as well. So I open it up to questions.
I don't have a question, but wasn't this generated by staff?
Part of, yes, it came out of, remember we had our employee engagement survey, and part of that is analyzed how we did with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that started there, and then also came out in town hall discussions we've had with our staff, and that's actually what led to the initial working with Viva Hasmalash in the first place.
I applaud staff for looking at ways to improve their working conditions, their interactions with one another. So I think this is very important.
Jennifer, do you have anything that you'd like to add to what Todd said?
Maybe just a little bit of additional detail just for scale and scope. So this is, this will be a 6-month development project with folks. It covers 22 managers and supervisors, so all of our what we would call leadership. One of the big areas of focus that I had when looking at this was sustainability. So obviously we can't go through this, annually. So how do we create with this initial process a way to carry it forward as part of our leadership development ongoing? And so that consideration is built into this proposal where we have our leadership and development, or excuse me, our learning and development program manager is actually going to be doing train the trainer work with this consultant. so they can actually pick this process up after this year and just integrate it into our management and supervisor education going forward.
Yeah, I think that that's a great
Yes.
component of this for sure, because it really ensures that the money spent will have a long lasting impact.
So let me ask you a really, really stupid question. What are we meaning by diversity, equity, and inclusion?
As it relates to this proposal,
Well, I've heard this everywhere. Almost every organization is doing DQI. Or diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI. And when I asked them what does that mean, I just kind of looked and said, well, it means diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I had
No, you have great
no idea
question.
what we're talking about. I have no idea. I have my preconceived notion of what it is. What is it really?
Well, can I, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
I'm gonna take a shot and then Jennifer's gonna correct me.
Oh, absolutely. Somebody,
Because,
please.
because my view of it is not a standard
Oh, good.
view. Really, for me, this boils down to one thing, and that is that everybody has a chance to be their authentic self, whether at work or the way they're treated when they come into the library. And the thing that we need as far as our training is to help discover blind spots where we may think we're treating everybody equally, but we're not. So we're not getting the full value from every employee, where they might not be bringing up issues that would really help improve our library, because either we put systems in place where it's too bureaucratic for them to get information to us, or we are blinded to hearing what they're saying. And that's why for me, it kind of boils down to that the opportunity where you have a chance to be as honest and authentic about what you are experiencing in your work or in using our services, so that we improve for all. And that's where I said I'd let Jennifer correct it, because I don't think you're going to read that definition in any book. But I think that's where we can really thrive as a library. And we've been really pushing to do more work in this, and we're just at the tip of that, of really trying to get more feedback from staff and being more open for feedback from staff. We've been doing the same thing with the public, and it shows. It's something like that discussion about the LEED certification, that being open to hearing other ideas starts to generate new ideas. And we've seen that in a number of things we've done recently with our staff, where I can guarantee you that the product that we thought we were going to do, which probably would have been good, is degrees better, because we've heard from people that we didn't traditionally hear from. So that's my view of it, and that's where I'll let Jennifer actually give you what's probably more correct.
No, I like that view, but what is authentic self in your mind?
For me, that's where when you have just where you can actually feel the safety to actually say what's on your mind.
Okay.
I have a concern of something. There's something that we can improve in our library, but I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to stand out. But it may be something, if we don't hear it, we're never going to improve it, and it's going to help our entire community.
So it's an environment where you feel safe and you are encouraged
Yes.
to express an opinion without regard to the consequence to yourself, not having personal attack back, talking about issues and things like that.
Yes.
So we're not talking about, maybe Jennifer will clarify, because I'm looking at this and said, the person I heard of went, low-lying fruit, of course, racial equality. But is that what we're talking about here?
That's part of it.
I think that's a very
Maybe part of
important
it,
part. Okay, I like to think of equity, diversity, and inclusion kind of as a triangle, right? So, for example, diversity, and we build this into our mission, taking into account the perspectives of all ages, all backgrounds, outreach, being able not just to meet people where we are, but to meet them where they are. To create an environment where somebody of any race, nationality, creed, color, religion, national origin, age, disability status feels psychologically safe, feels included, that as it relates to staff, feels that they're operating in a culture of trust.
But also related to the public.
Yes.
Well, looking at institutionally, your policies and practices and ways that we might exclude people without even knowing it. So you have to, I think you have to be purposeful in looking for those things and including, looking at those things with the people that are affected to work together to reduce those barriers.
So we're really talking about empathy here.
That's a big piece of it, yes.
That's a big thing. So in dealing with the public or even to our staff, to the staff, you don't have your intrinsic unknown biases going into policies like artificial intelligence is totally biased based upon whoever's writing the program. They're saying certain characteristics of certain people rank them lower in their opinion than others. And that's built in as a bias from the programmer themselves. So we're talking about this within everyone, not just the leadership. They have to work with each other.
So, yeah, I think this is really valuable, and I would encourage staff as they, well, I mean, we have to approve of this or disapprove it, but to also involve the board with this too, because if we are policy makers for this entity, we need to also be up on this. Because it's a really important part of our work as we look at results policies and as we make decisions. So I would hope there in the future that some of this information would be part of a board presentation. Maybe a work session, I don't know.
Yes, actually, thank you. That makes my job easier because that's a piece of what we need to do. So that foreshadowing what's coming your way.
Okay. All right, well,
Well, let me ask you, Trevor, how does this definition compare with what other organizations define diversity, equity, and inclusion as? Does everybody define it the same way?
Well, I'd say that I have a two-part response, right? It's organizationally driven, so it may be different for each organization. There's always a textbook, definition for these items. If you look them up, you're gonna find, what these mean, sort of universally. And so I would, based on my interactions with other agencies and districts, where they're going with this is similar to where we are, which is kind of doing a lot of soul searching with what's meaningful for their organization and what makes sense for them. So, the city of Bend is doing a lot of this work, but we're not like the city of Bend. We're our own, unique organization with our own unique issues. So, but I would say that we're well dialed into this process, that I think we have a good sense of where we need to be.
So you're saying that like the city of Bend, they're also looking at setting an environment with the employees, the staff, can be open with each other and with the public. And that's their definition of diversity, equity, inclusion
I
training.
think that's part of it.
Because if we're not talking the same language here, not definitions, then we have one agency doing one thing, one agency focusing on another. General public will get rather confused. Not only that, our staff may get confused when they start hearing like the school district is doing something different. Their emphasis and definition of DEI is different from ours. So everybody wants to say we're right. So who's doing the right thing? Maybe right for our organization. But if there is a generally accepted definition for all of this, how does our concept fit in? I like our concept a lot.
So I don't think we have any control over what other agencies, how other agencies define it or how they implement it within their,
Well, what Jennifer's saying is a textbook definition or something out there.
well, and I think we've hired knowledgeable consultants in the field and
I can add to that a little bit. There is a lot of coordination that goes on between agencies in Central Oregon. Through COCC, we all attend basically the same trainings around EEI. And then we also have been working through the collective impact band model, discussing this very topic, where we have a number of staff from each agency working together, talking about this, talking about how we coordinate. Because I think you hit a very good point, that we don't all want to go off in 20 different directions and it looks different. I think right now what's happening is almost every agency is kind of in the discovery mode where we are right now, where we've got to do some internal soul searching and education before we get to points where we're implementing things. But it's a good point, and there is coordination that's going on with other agencies.
would anyone like to make a motion about this or any further questions?
Do we need any further discussion?
Well, I would, just for rules of order, maybe make a motion and get a second and then call for discussion.
I'll make a motion that, let's
So
see.
I'm not, I can make a motion.
I can help. What we'd be looking for is authorization for me to enter into contract with, what's their name of the, sorry, Jennifer, I lost the name of the company.
Michael Drager Consulting.
Oh, and if you could do it, is it not to exceed, I don't know how tight the budget was, should it not exceed be a little over the 76, or are we good on that number?
I think we're good, but I think you bring up a good point.
So if you want to just give us a little leeway in case there's other aspects we come up with them, we could say not to exceed 80,000. And if it's changes, we could always come back.
You mean the budget? I mean the,
Not to
Not to-
enter into contract, not to exceed $80,000 for services with Michael Grader Consulting.
A 6-month contract.
okay, well, I so move for the library director, Todd Dunkelberg, to pursue starting the leadership coaching proposal not to exceed $76,000.
80.
What?
80.
80, yeah, exceed 80.
That was all of it.
It's a 6-month contract. There's a time limit.
I'll say. That's. Her
Okay.
proposal was good.
Okay,
Good enough.
You get the
Any-
intent.
any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
I'm gonna abstain.
Okay, we're now at, do we need to take a break? Do we take a quick break? All right, let's take a break until 3 o'clock. Well, let's get through the executive session. Well, let's just do it.
Raspberry.
Okay. All right, okay. I'll call the meeting back into order.
Wait, we have to eat chocolate.
Well, you can eat chocolate while I read. How's that? I have my mask on, so I will not have the chocolate.
Okay.
Okay, we are going to the Deschutes Public Library District. We'll conduct an executive session to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions as pursuant to ORS 192-6602. So we are now in executive session.
Okay, and I'm going to cut off our Zoom during executive session. So we will go to stopping video.
Call us back into regular session. Okay, library news, Todd.
Okay. So first of all, I want to highlight that usually every February every even year, the board receives a report on my performance, an external evaluation of my performance. We've done it in a 360 type process where in the past, Jim Yeager came and he would interview staff and people would fill out a survey. He's retired.
Oh.
And yeah, just letting you know that I've been working with Jennifer. I've kept Ann alerted just because we've been trying to find somebody. 360 is not as much in vogue as it used to be, so that's kind of causing a little difficulty trying to find something for you as a board that's comparable to what we got in the past. So I just want to let you know that that is not going to be ready by February. I don't think that harms anything as far as our system. The one piece that we like to have is if you're going to make any salary changes, it's nice to have that information before we get to May when we actually do the budget. So that's kind of, we're aiming to get something for you, and we're just working on what that looks like. But I just wanted to have you alerted to that. It became more complicated than we thought. It was very easy when we had the same person doing it for the last 12 years. So,
What kind of critiques are involved now? That are valid.
those are great questions. I should have Jennifer in for that. And I know we talked with Jennifer a little bit. I'm
Yeah.
trying to remember.
Just not the 360 instrument, but she asked questions about what the board found valuable out of that process, and I kind of told her how we had used that before and why we went to that type of system, and so it didn't sound like it would be as deep of a process, but it would be management team related.
A nice kind of thing that wasn't in existence when we started doing this is we've started doing engagement surveys with the employees. So it kind of highlights it. It adds something. You're getting somewhat of a view of me, and you're also seeing what everybody in the district is experiencing. So two reports that work well together.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Originally, you just got information on me, and that's
Right.
so
Right.
that makes this a little easier. She's really just doing a lot of investigation into different ones. And I was just talking with her about that this morning. She's working with a few different people, just kind of getting a sense of what they do and what that is like.
Right, originally she had talked about one that was kind of like the traditional goals and objectives type of thing, which didn't really match how we do things, so. Yeah, so I think she has a better idea of what she's looking for now, and so she's out.
Yes, and I brought Ann in because it's kind of puts Jennifer in a tough spot to have her boss tell her to figure out how to evaluate.
Yeah, right,
So,
exactly.
I thought it'd be better to hear it from the people that are actually gonna evaluate it, so.
Right, and to get something that would work for all of us, that we felt like it was a good measure and was useful, and that Todd would feel was useful as well.
I think personally, the really strength of the 360 was your evaluation of yourself and then everybody else's, and to see where you think you're strong and where they think you're strong, and weak, and then reconcile those two, but then having Jim come in and coach you. So it's
Right.
actually the coaching afterwards that was most important,
Right,
most beneficial to us. And then we could, in 2 years, evaluate against that again, because you made tremendous changes, strides forward. And that's what I really like to see is your own self-development
Right.
as a leader. Everybody, I can't say anybody can manage. We have a president that managed really well, but I didn't say that, that's not on the finish, right? So,
No, that's a great point, just for your, based on the last 360, I do have a personal coach. It's not him anymore, but that will be, no matter what process we
we
have,
have that,
Mhm.
I have a coach to work with when we have goals coming out of it.
excellent.
And we did discuss the self-evaluation part of the 360, that was, yeah,
Yeah, good.
yeah, so she's up on, the latest, and it's just finding the best fit, I think.
Okay, so
Stay
bottom
tuned.
line is, we may not know until May, or we didn't do something before May.
We're hoping to have something for you, at least by April. So we're definitely not gonna make it February.
Okay. Just pressure on you making the budget, that's all.
Right.
That's, you know, my matter.
No, that's easy. I just I'll budget in an extra $50,000.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Not to exceed.
Good.
Other news, I just wanted to highlight, and Lynn's gonna help me come up with this. Emily talked with you a little bit in her collection development about directions we're going, about how we do subjects, nonfiction subjects in our collection, and we have kind of gone through, talked with all of our staff. We've actually made a decision, and we're going to be moving how we catalog our nonfiction and our fiction books. And I forgot our term we're using for it's not,
It's a genreification,
there you go.
what it's called. A genreification.
Cool.
Yeah, and it is yet to be developed. They are going to be working very diligently on that over the next 60 days because we need to get something started and be determined so that we can start working on our opening day collections for Sisters in the Pine with our vendors. So this is going to move very quickly. But what it means is will be really a complete reorganization of a lot of our materials, especially in the adult collections. There will be, and you know, genres, so I'll use travel because it's easy. Like travel might be a main category, and then you could have maybe a country, like we'll say the United States as a subcategory. And then we're gonna do kind of a little bit of a hybrid, and then you might see a Dewey number, because Dewey does still kind of put things together. So like if it was travel in the United States, and you would see like the number for Montana, and the number for Washington, and the number for Oregon. But Emily and her team, along with other staff members throughout the district, will start coming up with, what are these categories? What are we gonna call them? What are the broad categories? And so forth. So you're gonna, they're gonna be working a lot on that over the next, like I said, determining some of these categories in the next 60 to 90 days, and then coming up with a game plan. And it's gonna go very much coincide with our remodeling and reopening of a lot of our branches. So when the first branches open up, Sisters in the Pine, not only will we see this big, beautiful building with all these wonderful books, but it's gonna be like a brand new experience as well. The fiction books as well, we're gonna go to genres on those. A little bit more, but way better than the bookstore model.
You still will be able to have known item or known title or author books, but we will have bigger categories. And a lot of our books already have like a mystery sticker on it, or romance, science fiction, fantasy. We're just gonna start grouping them together in those genres in our fiction.
So you just,
More to come.
so Cynthia will be the judge of whether it's better than the bookstore model or not, so,
Well, except for Cynthia's store.
yeah.
Yeah, which was
Yeah,
excellent.
right.
Except for Cynthia's store. Whenever I always think about it as Barnes and Noble. You know, and sometimes.
right?
Oh, and Hawaii.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, and I got 2 for
You
1.
can run down the gauntlet.
Yeah, exactly.
So a lot more to come, and we started doing this with our picture books, and now we're just gonna expand it to a lot more of our collection.
Actually, bookstores are now looking at different ways how to organize there. So I know the Pacific Northwest Bookstore Association, they have a committee that's actually pursuing that.
Yeah,
Because sometimes you get a book and you have to shelve it and you think, what is this? You know, it could go here or here.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
that's,
we used to
that's what
have
we're
many of
seeing.
those discussions. didn't we?
Yeah.
Like,
But Dewey can be that way too.
It can be, and you know, I think that probably this might be a different conversation or a different presentation as we get into it.
Right.
Yes.
But we just wanted you to be aware of it, that it's coming, and we're, the whole library district is very excited about it.
And prepared for the public going back saying, where the heck
Oh,
is this
sure.
going?" If they had that
Oh,
stuff.
sure.
When they changed the children's section, it's like, what the heck is going on here?
There's a lot more positives out than there is negatives. So we all will have
Genreification.
the genre.
And at some point, when we get farther down, we want Emily to give the presentation, because it's fun to see, I know you're out there, Emily. It's fun to see her enthusiasm around this and just the detail they go into.
We'll do a test and see if we can find a book.
Okay. Other updates, I gave you each the upcoming conferences, and I just gave that for your interest. Basically, in the past, I had you fill out forms and tell me what you're gonna do. I don't need anything that formal. Basically, what I've come down to every year is I kind of budget the same amount anyway. It would be interesting to know, oh, there's 2 things actually we should know. What you should do in this public meeting is tell me if you plan on going to any of these, because based on that insurance program we had, if you recall, he said, if it's stated in a board meeting that you're going to a conference, then you're covered by insurance.
Right.
If you just go and we don't know about it, they won't cover us.
Right.
So that might be one to do, whether it's, whether you do something now or at the end of a meeting, if you sign up for something, just let the board know. We just get it into the official record.
Okay, well, when we have board comments,
Yeah.
add that to your comment then.
And then for this year's PLA, I'll point out that because Public Library Association's meeting in Portland, Oregon Library Association members, and you're all members, get a discounted rate. And they just sent out a notice saying they've extended the deadline till the end of the month. And they've also noted that there's, you can also do a remote only. I think that's a little foreshadowing. I keep waiting for them to cancel the entire event and go completely remote. But if you're interested in that, just be aware that that's out there.
Do you know, have any of the conferences talked about doing a combination of both remote and in person?
Well, Public Library Association and whatever date is coming up in March, that will be both.
And I can tell you, SDAO's conference was supposed to be both, and just last week they came out and they said, you know what, we're gonna be 100% virtual.
Yeah, it's all virtual.
Yeah.
And it's free.
Oh, I missed that part.
Nice.
Just a reminder, because Greg mentioned something about the architects in January 28th with all of you. That's on Zoom. Just,
Oh, is it?
yeah, because they were unable to travel for that, so. It's in a Zoom invite on, that I sent out. I just want to reiterate that, because he kind of made it sound like, I said January 28th, hopefully.
Yeah.
Oh, the last thing I had was, I sent you all the feedback that we gathered from our presentations in October, November. And I just wanted to check in with you. There's a couple of things. I did check with the architects. That's the format they had. They didn't break it down by branch. I know you'll see, you have to kind of hunt for it. They did not have another format, and they are busy doing their 100% schematics, and I did not ask them to do a different format. I wanted to check in with the board and see where you were with that. I also want to highlight that most of that was focused around Central and Redmond, because those were the areas they were designing at the time. We are now just starting schematic designs for Lapine and Sisters. And so there will be more, we will have more rounds of public engagement for those. And we'll have more rounds of public engagement around East Bend and Sun River when we get to those. And then more public engagement when we get to downtown Bend. So just highlight that piece as well.
So the focus of what we really need to pay closest attention to the comments on Central and Redmond.
Yes, but they are taking theme, they're listening to
Yeah.
everything. That's one thing I have to say about these architects, they listen to everything.
Right.
And so they definitely were taking themes from everybody's comments and trying to see how they fit that into what they were doing. So I just wanted to check in with you on that, and then just get a sense for, at the last meeting, the board asked for the raw results. And which was, as you saw, it was a pretty big packet. And just know that they can, in the future, they can summarize that, we can continue doing raw results. It's just helpful to know what the board will be expecting.
Do they
From
have that, digitally, seems like rather than, just as was a lot of printing and postage. could
Oh,
you
yes,
Get it digitally.
well, we could do that. At the last board meeting, the board asked for it in paper, so,
Makes it easier to sort out.
Oh, I think it would be easier to sort digitally, but
Not if they don't have, it's not on Excel or spreadsheet,
yeah.
the Word program.
Yeah.
It's hard to
Just-
sort.
To clarify a little bit, because it's kind of two different things. So the information that you got that I think shows like each individual comment,
Mhm.
that's coming in from the web. So when we just asked we had some general questions and had people give us feedback on the web. And then what the architects summarized, those were from our community conversations that we had, right?
Right.
So they're two different
Right,
sets
Right.
of input. Okay,
Right.
this one would be clear.
yeah, that was
Yeah.
pretty clear. Todd made that
Okay,
clear.
great.
I was just trying to save trees. So.
yeah. Trust me, yeah, we didn't, when we started printing them, we were a little shocked. Because there's a lot there.
Oh, yeah, well, that's good, good responses.
Yes, yeah. And to put it in context, in the past, what we do is go have a focus group at each branch. And we'd probably have been lucky if we hit 75 to 100 people across the county. So it is kind of, it's nice if there's other ways that people can get input that you wouldn't have heard from in the past.
Well, they think about doing this as a combination, like, virtual and in person. The charrette process is, the advantage of that is you're gonna have people ask questions of the architecture and the designs and everything, and then they make their comments. And so they can have their questions answered, which it really helps for them to make a informed comment.
Yes, and a lot of the focus groups that we did online, those they had that opportunity. the easy answer for this is just, we're just trying to negotiate COVID. And
Right.
that's part of our challenge. Is do we do things, like right now, I probably would have been planning for that, but now we're in a situation where we probably would have pulled back anyway. So, yes, that's a difficult part of it.
And we're also hoping to do displays at each library. So like in Sun River and Sisters of Pine, that there'll be a display of those schematic designs for that building. And then I'll have some form of, people being able to comment on that and get that back to us. So that's a more passive way, but it'll be up for several weeks, and that'll give people who actually come into the library and use us to give us good feedback. What we were trying to do with our community discussions is to reach people who, number one, serve people who we know need the library coming in, people who are maybe disabled or seniors or the Latinx community, the BIPOC community, et cetera, and how we can best get deeper into the community. So they were giving us really good feedback on how to do that. And then the website, we had a big reach out to that. So on Facebook and in other ways like digital advertising to get to people who may not use us, but that they could be drawn in if they had opinions about the future library. So we're trying to think of how to hit different target audiences and different methods to get a clearer picture.
Did you get a lot of response on Facebook and social media?
Yeah, that we do the digital ads on Facebook to get people to then go into like our website. That's more, we were trying to, and yes, that's a good way. We try not to, on Facebook, that's another whole conversation, which we'll have we have our communications team present to you all. But we try not to talk too much specifically about the library programs because we see that Facebook drops off when we get too specific. So yeah, it's an interesting psychological thing. So anyway, but we can talk about that more.
Have we thought about maybe putting up some of these surveys in non-traditional library places, park and rec headquarters, amphitheater, places like that, where people congregate,
Right.
the old mill or whatever?
Yeah, so once we can get whatever we're putting into our branches designed, then we'll have other sets to get out to chambers and other locations like that. Yeah. Walmart,
I just want to say I appreciated getting the packet, it was a little overwhelming, but I can honestly say I think I read every single one of them. And so it was very informative to me to know what people are hoping for in our libraries, but also to know their concerns. And some of them spent a great deal of time going through. And so I just really appreciated our customers' input on what they want to see from our library system. So I found it very helpful, for me as a board member to know what our community thinks of our system.
Yeah, I agree. I made sure to read every single one of them. People took the time out to do this, and it's been very helpful. All this feedback has been really helpful, and it shows in our designs that what we started with way back in July and August is it looks a lot different based on people's feedback. So that's it's kind of exciting to see that process work.
And I think the specifics, the specificity, like you say, of what people said they were interested, these are the types of programs I would come to the library for. I think it's got to be really helpful to the programming staff, and because sometimes you're kind of in a vacuum trying to decide what people want. And this really gave a lot of really good creative ideas, and themes really came up over and over again, which I thought was great.
And that was my library news.
Okay, well, I just have a bit of foundation news. Our first author presentation is going to be tomorrow night, Amy Tan, 7 o'clock. Tickets are available. And you can still get your discount by buying the entire series. So go to the foundation website and buy your tickets. Yeah, I think it's gonna be a great year and there's gonna be an article tomorrow in the bulletin. So hopefully that will drive some more ticket sales and they're making good progress on getting sponsors. Yeah, so things are good
And
moving along.
you want to tell us about the new staff person of the foundation?
Yeah, we have a new staff person, Sarah Whooper, who is going to be working on major gifts for the library system as a whole, but specifically for the capital projects. So we have somebody that is going to be dedicated for donor outreach and working on grants, and she's really got great connections. She's a smart woman, and I think she's really good choice. So she's just getting going.
Before your next meeting, we have another author coming.
Oh, sorry, yeah, and so Tommy Orange, who wrote There, which was one of the big books of 2019, I think. Yeah, and if you haven't read that book, it's an incredible book. So he's one of those bright emerging authors who writes about urban Native American themes, which fits in really well with our novel idea book this year. So it's a really nice combination. And COCC is doing some programming around grading sweetgrass. And so we've got kind of a good combination of things going on here. It's gonna be, I think it's really gonna be great for programming. So yeah. So that's all I've got. Self-review of meeting. We started this, you're always at the far end first.
No, I just want to say, I think it was a great idea for us as a board member to kind of hold our questions at the end. I think our discussions, the presentations went very well, and then our discussion afterwards went well. So I think that's a great addition to our meetings.
And I agree with that, that it seemed to flow so much nicer. And you can, thank you for the pad of paper. But write your questions down, ask them afterwards. And I just appreciate the openness, the transparency. Robert and Chantal and what everybody's doing. I feel like we're well informed. I feel comfortable.
Mhm. Thank you, Robert. Very nice proactivity continues here in our facilities, guarding our assets. I like the idea you have response quickly to suggestions, comments from the staff. Close that loop, getting back to them. Excellent. I think they're really good. I mean, continuing to protect the assets on a regular proactive basis is really what it's all about. Saved us a lot of time and effort and money. Yes. Keep us running properly. And thanks, Greg. Very nice presentation as always. Let us know where we're at. Especially like the presentation on the redistribution of budget funds. Get into more detail as the design elements are being developed. Now that they're there, we can see more line items with the money flowing, how it's being allocated, and then being able to track against it to see how we're going. My greatest concern is overrunning the budget early on through no fault of our own. The economy just sucks away all our supplies, and our contractors have to increase their costs because of us. We're just sitting here going, done. Now what? So it's good. Proactivity by everybody.
Okay, it was a busy meeting. You had a lot of information given to us, so that was, I appreciated that. I appreciated, Robert, appreciated your presentation. Just keeping us up on what's going on with the different facilities, so thank you. I'm very excited about the equity, diversity and equity. I hope that's something that works out, and hope it spills into other aspects of the library as well.
Okay, yeah, no, I agree, and I appreciated your report, Robert. I particularly like the part where you talked about data mining and really looking at trends and using that in addition to all the other schedules and things that we've already set up to be proactive, because that is key. I mean, it's constant learning from our experience, and I think that that's great. It's our buildings are kind of the public's trust with us, and we've had a track record of taking good care of them, and we want to continue that. And also the attention to what do we need to hold off on given construction. That just makes perfect sense. So we're not paving the street, tearing it up, paving the street, as we've seen numerous times around the community. I like Greg's presentations as well, and I particularly like the budget breakout. That detail, and having that be a regular part of his report, I think would really be beneficial, because I really like that summary level of detail, but it really gives us a sense of where we are within the budget. And I think that that's important on a project of this scope and this duration, because it is easy to get lost in how much we're, what we're spending against budget. So I think that that was extremely helpful. I'm glad we had the lead certification discussion. I think that that was an important discussion to have. And the EDI coaching effort is I think something that we really will benefit from. And as I said, I think the board will, it's a good opportunity for board growth as well. Because we all want to be on the same page with that, definitely. And I did sign up for PLA in Portland. And I'm thinking, I don't know what the future will hold. So I do intend on going to that in some form or another, but we'll just see what things look like.
Okay,
When that-
you're now insured.
Okay, well, I may want to be insured, I don't know. So, and Todd, how would?
Yeah, I really appreciated the format of kind of holding the questions. Since it's new to us, it's kind of, I'm so used to just jumping in. I think it was very good when we have so much information just to keep things moving along. I really appreciate the discussion around lead, because I had no idea what direction the board wanted to go, and I think you all made some really good arguments for why we would go that way. And thank you to Robert for your presentation. If you haven't been noticing, Robert started in May, right when we hadn't even gotten our CMGC, or we hadn't gotten the architect.
I think I came on the week after the bonds went to market.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we've thrown them into the fire over the last 8 months or so, and I'm very happy to say, as you can see, he's doing an excellent job. And I think I told him when he started, it was a great time to start working here, because things are going to start happening, and they did. Nope. Yes. So thank you. That's all. It was a great meeting.
All right, thanks a lot.
Todd, I do plan on signing up for that, the PLA. I meant to do it, but I will.
Okay.
So, I want to go to that, see it.
Okay. And with that, we'll adjourn. Thanks for the great meeting.
Yes.